Welcome to the world of tomorrow. You are about to take a journey out of this world into the world of the future.
The atomic age was born.
The world of tomorrow became the world of today, bringing together all people in a new era of understanding.
Good sense requires that all of us prepare for any eventuality.
Imagine, if you can, an electronic brain operating at millionths of a second speed.
Electrical pulses transmitted with the speed of light.
Limitless power at man's command. On man's wisdom, on his firmness in the use of that power, depends now the future of his children and his children's children. But wisdom demands, too, that we take time to understand this force.
Combat Information Center is alert. Its radars probing the darkness, ready to give early warning of any unseen enemy.
But have no fear, we are monitoring the situation. And you are punch drunk on being up past your bedtime.
Way past me bedtime, right? Here I am in old Blighty, which has not been Blighty at all. Actually, it's been really hot, really humid, really unpleasant here in Oxford, but otherwise positively lovely.
Of course, it's because the climate has changed, old Bean.
Everybody is saying, like, every cab, it's like, okay, fine, I get it, you know. So, what they don't, anyway, it is,
go off, girl.
No, it's just like, I was here so this is my 5th time doing the Oxford trip, right? And folks, I know it's a little echoey. It is not Steve's fault. It is my fault because I am in a gonzo rig right now. But we wanted to make sure that we monitored even when things were not ideal. But, so this is my 5th time taking a group of students to Oxford, and really it's one of my favorite things to do. It's a great trip. This town is absolutely beautiful, just so inspiring. Anyway, 5 years ago, it was the same thing. It was super hot. It was super crunchy. Everything was burnt out. And then I come for the next 3 years and it's lovely. It's green, cold, wonderful. I mean, like cold summer, Steve. I mean, am I right?
It's almost as if the climate is cyclical.
Almost, right? Yeah. So, we've got a bunch of folks who are, of course, you know, freaking out about such things.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, look, it's warmer everywhere, but
yeah.
that happens sometimes.
Yeah.
There's so many things that are going to kill us before the planet does that I'm not really worried about it. So.
Yeah. So, but Oxford is lovely, my friend. I would love to walk the streets with you. Some great pubs, but really
we're gonna have to try to do this at some point in the future.
Yeah, we're gonna have to monitor together here in the great town of Oxford. But it just oozes. I mean, God, you know what we talked about studying abroad last week, I think, and you know, I had gone to Rome and I was explaining to you that experience. And you know, when I went to Rome back in the day, I was, I think, 19, maybe. It was the winter of 93, so I was about to turn 20. Yeah, I turned 20 while I was in Rome. Anyway, I mean, I loved Rome. Rome is just extraordinary, and I always sort of considered myself an Italophile, you know, after having spent that time there. But I mean, I came to England for the first time 5 years ago. And Steve, within 3 minutes, I was like, I'm from here.
See,
like,
I always assumed, you know, when I was in Europe that I would. Yeah, I kind of skipped because being based in Austria, the UK and Ireland were really far.
Yeah.
So it was really difficult to arrange travel there, you know, in the long weekends that we had. We had like 3-day weekends every weekend, but it wasn't really enough. And I didn't want to spend my long vacations on it because I had other plans. So I was like, oh, I'll come back because this is where my people are from.
Yeah.
And I never did. I've never been, never once. And it's
well,
something
I mean,
that's going to have to happen.
Yeah, I mean, this opportunity presented itself to me 5 years ago. My colleague had put this trip together and he brought me along, and honestly, I just took to it right away. It really feels like home, like I'm where I'm kind of supposed to be. And, you know, Oxford it's a modern place too, right? You've got all these Gothic cathedrals, but there's like a McDonald's and a Popeyes and a Starbucks. You know, they've got all the things. There's a mall right down the street. But man, there's just something about nature is different here, like just everything is just perfect. And, one of the things I try to teach the kids. So basically, I am the head tour guide of this. I teach a couple of classes in the morning, but I'm the guy who kind of takes the kids around and shows them the different colleges and the different libraries and the history and all of that. And so I'm kind of the trip docent, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's connected to our humanities program. So it's like we call it a kind of a pilgrimage of sorts because, that's sort of what we do. But I'm really trying to challenge the kids to be open, to have Oxford be the thing that teaches you, right? Like the town itself, and just sort of, and so, pull out your earbuds, get out of your phone, just absorb it all in. And they've been pretty darn good, but man, this place is just, there's just something extraordinary about it.
Well, there's something about connecting to the history of the things that you've been studying in school. I think Americans have a lot going on. America is an incredible country. I do think it's the best country in the world, but it's a young country and we don't have the depth of history. And I thought about this all the time when I was staying at the Kartause in Gaming, Austria, because the building that I lived in was like 750 years old and America wasn't even 250 years old. They say that on the backside of one of the walls, there's still a burn mark from when the Ottoman Turks came through and were shooting flaming arrows. Just the idea of the rootedness of a place. And then when you've studied things and you go to where they happened or where they were written or what, there's something about that really, it's like a time machine. I don't know what it is, but it connects you.
Yeah. We talked again a little bit about this before, but it really telescopes your sense of time and place, right? And it gives it the roots that you always sense are there, but to sort of walk in these places, we live in a hall here, and the oldest building in Oxford is the Church of St. Peter's of the East, which is actually in college here at St. Edmund's Hall. It's called Teddy Hall, and it's now a converted, they lease it from the Church of England for 999 years, and they use it as their library, because everything's just unfathomably secular here. But the building itself is pre-Norman.
Wow.
I mean, just grok that for a second. It's
so what 1066 is the invasion of Normandy.
So they do the Domesday Book about a decade after the 1066
invasion of Normandy.
Invasion.
It sound like World War II, but I meant the Battle of Hastings.
William the Conqueror and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
At any rate, so this library with this church, which is now a kind of de facto library, is in the Domesday Book. I mean, that's how old this place is, and and it's a great building, and then you can go on up the tower, and they've got this incredible crypt. And the reason why they called it St. Peter's of the East is that they were housing a relic from St. Peter. And so a lot of the motifs you'll see, like the chains kind of done into the stonework. And anyway, it's just so amazing. And to think that these people have been walking these grounds and studying and praying and being for that long is just hard to wrap your mind around.
Just out of curiosity, have you ever been up to Normandy in France, like Bayeux, the Cathedral of Bayeux, where they have the tapestry of the Norman invasion?
I have not got to that. No, I would love to do that.
I mean, because that's also, that's like a 12th century, maybe. Yeah. It's a gorgeous. I mean, it's one of those cities where the city is low and the cathedral is just massive up above.
It looms above. Yeah.
And it's really, really neat. Yeah.
So good. Yeah. So today we took the kids to the Bodleian Library and the Duke Humphreys Divinity Schoolroom, which is just so cool. A lot of these places you've actually seen in Harry Potter movies and stuff that used a lot of this area. Tomorrow, in 2 days, we're going to the new school, which, for them, the new college was built in like the 1630s.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So, it's been great. But man, I've been working. I mean, I'm earning my
Well, I've gotten that sense because I've messaged you several times about topics, related to the show and stuff, and I see that you read them and you don't reply, and I'm like, oh yeah, he's hustling.
I'm on the run. And I have to say, I'm a little bit of the internal cheapskate, but in order for me to use my cell phone provider charges me $12 a day.
Mm.
And I'm like, you know what? I can still use Wi-Fi when I'm at the house, when I'm at the dorm.
I get that.
But it's been kind of strangely liberating. So I can still use my cell phone to take pictures and videos and that kind of stuff. So I'm using it as my media device, but I'm just out and about walking, chatting it up with the kids.
Like the old days.
Yeah. It's really pretty cool. Pretty cool.
It's actually funny because I was thinking about like how interesting it is that we can do our show from 5 time zones apart across an ocean.
Yeah.
When I was in Austria in 1999, think about what it was like to try to call home.
Yeah.
Or even, like when September 11th happened, my brother was in Austria. Wow. And I was trying to call him to make sure he was okay and that nothing weird was going on there.
Sure.
And just trying to get through on an international phone call in 2001 was a chore. My honeymoon was in Rome, and when we needed to call home, we had to go buy these little cards.
Yeah. Yep.
And all this stuff. And it was just like, and now we're having a perfectly non-latent conversation over a video link and in high def, and it looks fine.
Yeah, it's astounding. I remember, so I went to Rome in the winter of 1993, so January of 93, and I was there through April, right? So I sort of did that chunk. So I got to see Easter in Rome and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, so it's hard to imagine, but I'm 19 years old. And, I get to Boston from Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
We fly from Logan to Fiumanchu or whatever it's called, the one in Rome. And I had on my person,
Is it Flumicello or something like that?
Yeah, Fumancello or something like that. I think at the time I had $600 in traveler's checks.
Right.
I had no cell phone, obviously, because cell phones weren't a thing for another 5 years, and a calling card, and no credit card. I mean, nothing. I mean, I had cash essentially that I had to go convert to lira, look for the better, the best exchange rate, all that sort of stuff. So anyway, my mom and dad are like, okay, when you get there, like settle in and like make Sunday the day you call, right? So the first Sunday rolls around and I dial like 27 numbers into the phone, right? To activate the calling card. And so we talk for like, and
15. You get that weird grinding sound ring.
And the quality of the line was just terrible, right?
Yeah.
So I talk 20 minutes or so. And so then I call back the next Sunday, and mom's like, yeah, maybe you don't have to call like every Sunday.
Did you call collect?
Well, I called using the calling card, and apparently it was like $100 or something. And this is back in like 1993. So mom basically is like, yeah, it's great to hear from you and all, but maybe
send
every
us a
other
letter
week,
or a postcard or something.
Once a month is probably fine. Don't call us, we'll call you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's funny.
Just a totally different thing. And, we traveled around, not as much as you got to travel around, but, we traveled around Italy primarily, Florence and Assisi and Subiaco, and no connection. I mean, I literally wrote letters on that little flimsy blue paper, the airmail. Wild. You just can't even imagine. I'm in a shock.
Even 10 years ago, I mean, I did podcasts, for my old job where I was talking to people across the pond. And we'd lose connection constantly, and so there's been a big revolution in telecom, I think, in the last decade to get us. I mean,
massive. But again, as you said, look at us. Look at us.
Who would have thought we'd be here? Not me.
We're in high def. This is great. So so look, I've been reading your messages and digesting things, but it's just been busy walking around talking. I've been talking every day all day. So
well, I have been trying in the time that I have to get through this book that we started talking about last week, and I have not succeeded. I am on chapter 9.
Okay, that's good.
But it's frustrating because this book is dense. Like, this isn't a book that you can rush through, because the thesis builds in a very sort of intricate way on all these different perspectives, and it's not immediately clear as you're going through the book what conclusion she's building toward. You get ideas, but you don't really get the whole thing. Now, I don't know how much you've gotten to look at it and how much it's changed since you read the early
I read an earlier draft. It seems pretty consistent with what I read. So,
okay.
Yeah, so I'm making my way through the McLuhan chapter, which is fairly early on. No, I think this is a tremendously important book. And like you said, unlike her earlier works where it's almost like a kind of tour through strange things, I think this one is much more consequential and theoretical in terms of building out her sense of what is going on between the sort of the UAP disclosure movement and the build out of the digital imaginary, and how that is actually altering our perceptions of reality itself.
Yeah. And it's super interesting to me because she hasn't talked a lot so far where I am about UAPs and NHIs. Like there's been a sprinkle. Most of it's been through, the fictional work of Arthur C. Clarke talking about an alien hive mind that absorbs the kids and all this kind of stuff. And that's the thing that I see her orbiting, is this idea of we're creating a kind of collective consciousness, which of course dovetails with we're constantly, you and I, talking about how does consciousness really work? Is it embodied? Is it collective? Is it both?
Mm-hmm.
And going through McLuhan's ideas about the way media shapes human evolution, going through Chardin's idea about the new sphere, and like that's just still really out there for me. I'm trying to get my arms around it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's very interesting, but I'm like the whole omega point thing, this idea of like, we're all evolving into some kind of weird collective consciousness that ultimately like brings us into the person of Christ. I don't really get that yet. And I'm hoping to get more.
Yeah. And I think people's allergy to somebody like Teilhard de Chardin is warranted on some level, right? I mean, especially if you're trying to check this against the code of received Catholicism or something like that.
Yeah, he's not an orthodox thinker, but he's a very interesting thinker from what
exactly. And I would just encourage everyone to read the book, number one, but number two, to try to understand what he seems to be intuitively getting at is more important than how it might check against
right.
The theological system.
It's kind of like what you said you had to do when you went to the Odyssey.
Yes,
where you had to set aside the pedant Kale who knows the book inside and out and says, how do I experience this thing as something new so that I can just see it for what it is?
Yeah. And that's thank you. I hadn't quite made that connection, but I think you're exactly right. That this entertaining of Desjardins is not so much in terms of whether or not it will neatly jive with received theological systems, but rather some sort of prophetic intuition of what we are doing. Now for Chardin, he seems to be suggesting that it's kind of an unqualified good. I don't think that's what Pasulka is doing.
Yeah, I'm not sure. She seems to just be presenting his thought.
Yeah, and so then I think the fair question, and I think the one that you're asking is, well, what actually is she? What's she on about? What's she on about here?
Yeah,
right. And I sense in her a much darker appreciation of this disclosure moment, whatever it is, right? Than I sensed in her earlier two works.
Mm-hmm.
In her earlier two works, she's like, wow, this is kind of cool. Like, that's so interesting. Oh, that's weird. Whereas this one, she's much more in the vein of a Jeremiah. We talked about Jonah, the kind of faulty visionary figure, in last episode. But in this one, I sense a little bit more of Jeremiah. That kind of mode of prophecy, not so much predicting the future, but the role of the prophet as reading the signs of the times.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's a more important understanding of what prophecy is. And I think that this is the kind of work that you and I are trying to do with this show, right? Not so much, neither of us are in the business of like, well, you really should put all your money on Red 13 because that's the one that's the one that's gonna hit. We're not talking about prophecy that way, but we're talking about the ability to like what's really going on. And therefore, if you can kind of grok what's really going on, then you can say, yeah, so this, these are three potential outcomes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, our tagline is finding signal in the noise, right? That's kind of the whole point, is that we're being inundated with so much information. How do you discern the true signals from the false ones? How do you figure out which dogs hunt and which ones are just wild goose chases?
Yeah. And maybe part of, I think both of us sort of share the frustration of all this noise, right? And looking for the signal. And is it possible that, I mean, look, we're going to continue to do that. That's how we operate. But are we missing something even bigger than just, what's going on in the news? Are we missing a kind of social, imaginal paradigm shift that you and I might not be part of? I mean, I think, we, 5 episodes ago, talking about the rise of the digital and the fall of the analog, we are both, as Gen Xers, both very online Gen Xers, still hybrid creatures. The memories that we retain of an analog world and the analog aspirations of some of our children. You were talking about your own kids and their frustrations with this new digital intelligence thing that is emerging. There are plenty of people who do not have any kind of disquiet. And I sense in Pasulka's work as of late that she is also disquieted by what she is seeing emerge. Not so much in terms of the grays, or even, anti-gravitational tech that may or may not be, whispered to, through the download in the ears of tech developers, but something much more, potentially devastating.
Sorry, I had to type something on my clicky keyboard and I muted myself. Because there's something I wanted to look for that you reminded me of, and I'll go back to it. No, but I think a perfect example of this is what you were describing just a few minutes ago about how you're not using your cell phone because the cost isn't worth it. So you were able to shift back into the analog mode that you grew up in. Mm-hmm. And it's like putting on an old pair of sneakers. Like, they're still comfortable. They're weird because they're not your new shoes, and the cushion's not quite the same, but you're like, oh, I know this feeling. I remember how these feel. Yeah. And the kids now don't have that. So,
or they're losing their grasp of that. You know what I mean?
Or they have to create it because it doesn't sort of exist naturally in their environment. And that's a very weird place to be. Another thing I noticed about Desjardins that was interesting. I mean, so she kind of sums up his thought in a couple of places, but this is a very short one. And I think it's interesting for anybody in the audience who might not be familiar with this and isn't potentially reading the book.
Go
she
ahead.
says, defying ecclesiastical suppression, Chardin described the human as being a vibrating, thinking mass that will form into a giant network of mind, matter, economic, and artistic forces and would ultimately station itself above the Earth's biosphere. This conception of the human being was, and still is, so foreign to modern definitions of personhood, rooted in individualism, biology, and autonomy, that it offends the sensibilities of both religious orthodoxy and secular rationalism alike.
Yes.
And it's a very interesting thing, his news sphere, meaning, it's like a big global mind meld, really, is what it comes across as. And what I thought was really interesting is she said that he started perceiving this as a child. There's a section where she talks about the fact that, like, when he was a little kid, like 6 years old or something like that, he started feeling like he was beginning to perceive this stuff, and he didn't know what he was perceiving, but that means really that he was an experiencer.
Yeah.
In the term that we use now, whether it's a spiritual experiencer, whether it's a UAP experiencer, like people who run into the woo, people for whom the veil seems to be thinner than it is for everyone else. They see and sense things that the rest of us don't necessarily. And this goes back to our constant conversation about our ability to perceive reality accurately. How do we know that we're perceiving what's really there? And I don't know, man. There's something here.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that in a real way we don't. Right? That part of this feeling of thrownness is not coincidental, right? That it's related to this emerging. I mean, even kind of at its most basic level, we talk about the World Wide Web. Well, like, what exactly do we mean by that metaphor? The World Wide Web.
Mm-hmm.
It's not literally a web. It's only metaphorically so. And so what exactly is that analogy?
Well, it is kind of a web, though. I mean, the idea of ARPANET, the Advanced Research Project, I forget what the heck it was called. It's like DARPA. I forget what the dang acronym stands for, but it was the defense version of the internet before the internet. And the idea behind it was to create, this was during the Cold War, a distributed network of information for academics, scientists, and military and government, so that in the event of a nuclear war, the knowledge would not be wiped out in one location because it was distributed. So it literally was a network of wires and cables and server installations and all this kind of stuff. And it's funny because if you ask anybody now, like, where is the internet physically? Where could you go? Like, could you go into a building and point to the internet?
There it is.
And it's like, you can't do that because it's everywhere.
Yeah.
You could go to a singular installation. You can go to nodes that have, that are on the hub. I used to live in Northern Virginia, in an area where a lot of that hub stuff was built in the United States.
Yeah.
And there's an unusually high concentration of data centers there now because of everything, because they've got access to the backbone, right? But it's like, but it has redundancy, and so it really is kind of a web, both physically and metaphorically. It's a weird thing.
So when you hear the word web, where does your mind go? I mean, I think of a web in kind of a couple of different ways.
Well, I mean, if you're asking me, I mean, the first immediate image is a spider's web, right?
Yeah.
But right after that, it's more of I really see a constellation of dots that are connected by lines. It's almost like our red yarn thing that we talk about. It's like there's all these different things, and they all have connections to one another that are not necessarily readily apparent.
Yeah, so it's a pattern, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a pattern of some sort, right? And so the spider web, of course, is a technology, a strategy built out by a spider in order to entrap food. In essence, right? But then you can talk about, so that's web in a kind of negative register. But you can also talk about webs, that are, a web of intrigue, webbing as a kind of, well, maybe it's always something that you use to catch something. Like the webbing of like a fish net or something like that.
I think what's interesting about it is that if you have a bunch of interconnected things, the goal isn't necessarily to catch something, but it is a secondary effect.
Yes. And what's interesting about the web too is that it is both a device to capture, but it is also a device to detect, right? Because if there's a twitch on the web over here, it will signal to, the spider who might be on another part of the web, that something is incoming, right? So it's a detection device as well as a capturing device.
Well, I mean, just think about what you just had to do right before we went on the air. You had to jury rig a setup in this room so that we could record, and you've got probably wires going to different things. You've got things propped up on other things, right? Like your web of interconnected media devices so that we can do this broadcast isn't designed to catch something, but if you get up and try to go to the other side of the room to get something, you could very well trip over it. Like there is something about connecting things that creates obstacles and interference. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but it seems like it's an interesting thought to put on the board.
So if we're taking this idea, of a web and sort of walking our way through, in this case, Desjardins, how would a web alter, the sort of the structure of the world, the structure of the universe? Right? You see what I'm getting at? Like
I do. I'm trying to decide whether I like the image of Chardin's noosphere as a web. Because I don't know, I have a weird visual in my mind when I think about it. Of like it's like from a movie, all these people all around the world, and there's like beams of light going up from their head, and it's like coalescing into like this shield around the earth of consciousness kind of a thing. Like that's the image that the phrase now evokes for me. And I don't know if that's a web because it's an intangible thing. It's almost like an esoteric thing.
Right. So it's a web of light as opposed to in, in the case of the spider,
right.
Sort of silk. Right.
Yeah. But it is a kind of merging. I don't know. It's these concepts are super weird. And yet I do see, and that I've traditionally been resistant to the most famous theme from Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message, because I have a tendency to be more utilitarian in the way that I look at tools.
This is true. Yeah, we have had this sort of, I wouldn't say fight exactly, but we always kind of
we've debated it a bit. Yeah,
we've always pushed back at one another on this score. Yeah,
but this is helping me to see why that is probably an insufficient way of looking at it. I am of the belief that a hammer is a hammer, and you can use it for a nail or you can use it to hit your neighbor in the head. But the hammer is still just a hammer, right? And that's kind of the way I've always approached even things like media. Like it is not the message. The message is using the media. It's piggybacking on there. It's a carrier. But if the shape of the technology that is being used as a tool is changing the way not only that we interact with it, but with each other, and it's doing so in a kind of secondary effect way where it's not even intended, it's just what happens, then there is something to that is changing us. And I guess in a way that would, to go back to the hammer, would map to the analogy of, if you're a hammer, every problem is a nail. Like, where does that idea come from? It comes from once you start using a blunt object to start hitting a bunch of stuff, pretty soon you start looking for things to hit because maybe you're having a good time. And it has a change in you. You're like, well, now I have this thing. What can I go find that I can hit with it?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And, so in my mind, like, and I know this is a very, itself a very complicated question and one that is nuanced, I think. But, if you look at the hammer is fundamentally an extension of the human body, right? In theory, it's like an extension of your fist, let's say, right? So that even in a modern hammer, it kind of comes out from your hand, and it's got this thing that's harder than your fist, and you can concentrate an incredible amount of force, without hurting yourself. And so it's still like an extension of your physical arm, I suppose, or your hand or your fist, or all of those things. But digital technologies are not bodily in the same way. It's not completely disconnected from, it's not completely it's still an extension of the human person, but it seems to be an extension of increasingly abstract functions of the human person.
I would agree with you. Like it's not about physicality. It's about conceptual extension, perceptory extension.
Yeah.
And actually, this might be I feel like my microphone is really loud today. Is it blowing you out?
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah.
But there was something. So I started watching last night before, I started watching Pasulka on Rogan, because Rogan had her on, presumably because of the new book.
Yeah.
She struggles in that environment.
It is true. I know. I listened to it as well. Yeah. What did you sense?
Well, part of it is I feel like she's not accustomed to being questioned by a persistent, inquisitive mind. I kind of get the feeling she's used to her explanations being considered sufficient. And because we've noted, she has a tendency to be even more cryptic than you do. I think being asked to just clearly answer questions is very difficult for her for some reason. And so I noticed that, when Rogan was pressing her on the idea of, J.D. Vance saying maybe this stuff is all demons, and she was trying to explain it to him, but then when he would ask her clarifying questions, she would just kind of stutter and get caught up.
Yeah, there was a particular moment where he was pressing her on, like, what do you mean deception?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean? Like, what do you mean?
What is the mechanism by which they're deceiving people? Are they talking to them? Are they, are they getting messages? Like, how? And she just couldn't answer the question simply enough, or even to say, you know what? I don't actually know all of the ways, but I get what you're saying, and it is relevant, et cetera. But there was no ability to bridge the epistemic gap between the two of them. And so it started to become kind of a frustrating exchange for a while until they pivoted to something else.
Yeah, that's right.
But what I wanted to bring up is I felt like there was one moment in the podcast. I made it 2 hours into 2 hour and something podcast, and I think that she gave away the theme, whether she intended to or not.
Yeah,
and I found it. I queued it up before we went on the air. I'm not going to play it. I'm just going to read from the transcript. She says to Joe, if you look around and you see, I noticed that you had some cool Buddha statues out there. All right, so you look around at religion. What is it that people in religion do? A lot of them pray in certain ways. Well, why are they doing that? What is prayer anyway? So some of that, you can see that there's something that they're trying to do. They're trying to interact, contact. There's a contact with these. I'm reading a transcript, so the grammar is weird. There's a contact with these. And so what if AI all of a sudden is a different form of contact? I'll give you a reason why I think this way, or that I'm speculating about it. When I started to ask the people who should know, like Lou Elizondo, and before that, Tyler, and by Tyler, she of course means Tim Taylor. Everybody knows it's him. I don't know why she doesn't just call him that.
I know.
Whatever. And Hal Puthoff and people like that, tell me what best, if you were to describe what it is that we're dealing with, what best is the description? And they would always point me in the direction of science fiction. And they would say, read this, read that. And I was like, science fiction? Okay, I'll read it. And it inevitably would point to a technology that helps interface humans with it, so that it's not us interfacing, because perhaps you'll remember you talked about those faculties that, human beings have these faculties for understanding reality, but we can't understand reality in its full reality, right? We can't do that because we're constrained by the ways in which we perceive things. Those are the perceptual faculties. What if AI becomes a perceptual faculty for us, and we're able to then, interact with it, so perhaps it has evolved and it's helped us evolve too? So perhaps AI is a bridge for helping us interact with these things. So to tie this back to her subject matter for the last two books and the one that's right on the cover with the UFO of this book, my understanding taking away from that is she's saying that we are creating a new form of consciousness of which AI is an integral part that is making it possible for us to communicate with whatever this other intelligence is that is here. It is a sensory extensor, kind of like the hammer is an extensor of the human person. And so what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you know, this, I mean, let's take this maybe historical a little bit. You know, if we look at technologies that have consequentially altered humanity, you know, you could think of something like the book, or heck, just think of something like written language. You know, that spoken language and thus heard language requires an incredible amount of RAM, right? Real-time
processing
power and memory, right? And so prior to mass literacy and prior to the sort of the literate world you and I grew up at the tail end of, you know, there was only so much that you could kind of hold verbally or orally. But with the invention of the alphabet, and ultimately that coupled with the invention of the written word, our powers of abstraction, you know, were sort of supercharged, so that we are able to manipulate ideas at a much more profound and analytical level that we humans were unable to do before. And so that changes things. You know, and obviously I'm not saying anything, you know, terribly profound right now. I'm just trying to lay out.
No, but I mean, I think that it's the kind of obvious thing that is overlooked because, you know, humans have had literacy for, I don't know, 10,000 years, whatever it is. I mean, so, you know, I think about the fact of you and I are fairly articulate, but I don't feel like I am ever able to express myself verbally in even these conversations nearly as well as I can when I sit down to write. There is something that happens there.
That's right.
That allows us to convey meaning more carefully, more completely. It does something to the way that we think, and that's why a lot of people say writing is thinking. You can't really understand what you think until you can kind of externalize and concretize it, and then look at it and say, is that really what I think?
Yeah,
you know, do I stick with that? Do I change it? How do I, you know, like I wrote a thing on my Substack today, and 2 people immediately commented on the cadence of, and it's like, but the cadence is a rhythm that I am using intentionally, subconsciously, but intentionally to draw you into the rhythm of the story that I'm trying to tell. Right. I don't know how to do that just sitting here talking to you. But it comes out somehow through that technology, and it's a technology that changes the way the brain works.
Right, because in some sense you're offloading the moment. Right, like when we're speaking, I'm thinking of the words I'm going to say sort of milliseconds before I'm saying them, right? But when I sit down and take, you know, pen to paper, you know, or, you know, hands to keyboard, and even those are a little bit different, but fair enough. They're close enough, I think. I'm offloading space holding so that, I mean, look, I even do this, you know, when I post on X, you know, like I'll have this idea kind of floating in my head, and I'll, you know, bang it out, and then I'll sort of take a look at it, and I'll think a second. And that now that I have that first sentence, let's say, out there, I'm freed up to kind of go to the next part or the next idea, but I can also kind of go back and look at the first idea or the third idea or the fifth idea. And then I can, my mind is naturally sort of making some parallelisms or, caveats or what have you, because I don't have to worry about the first couple of things. It's there.
It's almost like trying to organize a junk drawer. Like imagine you're looking for something like, I don't know, a key to an old padlock, right? And you go in your junk drawer and there's just a bunch of crap in there.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, I know this key is in here, but I have moved everything around and I can't find it. So you take everything out and you put it on the counter and you start arranging things by size and shape and all. And when you put it back in, now you can see everything.
Right.
And there's the key that you were looking for that you spent 10 minutes, but you couldn't find it because there's too much chaos in there.
I like
It's kind of like that.
Yeah. Right. So you're sort of putting things out like, sometimes when I've got a lot on my mind, let's say I've got a bunch of things I have to do and they're not all the same type of thing. Let's say I have to write a test, grade papers, arrange to get the grass cut or cut the grass, purchase an airplane ticket, make sure that my kid gets to practice, this essay idea, you got all of these things and and I will oftentimes like go to my classroom and I'll take out a piece of chalk and I need to see it. And I'll just start putting things in some kind of pattern on the board because in my head, it's like, it's all jumbled. It's like your junk drawer idea, right? But as soon as I can kind of start putting it all out like there, then I can see it. And I couldn't before. And, it doesn't sound all that profound, but when we figured out how to do that, it really changed the game. You think of something like, I don't know, something like Thomas Aquinas. One of the things that you are blown away by when you start reading parts of the Summa is it's just this massive spreadsheet, of interconnected ideas and cells, and there's no way to do that without writing.
Right. Correct. Yeah.
There's just we just don't have the short-term processing memory power, to sort of do that. But as soon as I can, put this on the board on the right, put on the left, and sort of I can see this whole thing, then my powers of my potential for depth just 10x's.
Well, and isn't that exactly what makes AI feel like magic?
Of course. Yeah.
Like a genie in a bottle, because you ask it a question.
Yeah,
no matter how deep, how complex, whatever, it fires back a response almost instantly, as though it is giving you something verbally. Although it is interesting to note that voice mode on AI is dumb compared to text mode.
Yeah.
Because there is something about verbally processing that actually uses more compute, whether biological or mechanical.
Yeah.
But just the rapidity with which it can give you something that is cogent.
Yeah.
That is internally coherent. That feels crazy because for us, it takes a long time to kind of do that with that little bottleneck of RAM that we've got.
Yeah.
To get it all out there and arrange it that way. And we can't ever do it that fast. There's just no way.
And so what it changes is the possible, right? If we can write things down instead of just speak them, it changes what is possible. Now, when things open up as possibilities, things are taken away, right? And you kind of think you always have to kind of look, we are really good at looking at the upsides and really pretty piss poor about figuring out the downsides. We're good about taking a look at the gains, and we're really not so great at looking at what gets lost, right? You've mentioned many, many times, of course, Plato and his kind of riffing on the idea that his concern about writing would somehow impoverish us. We would lose memory, I think.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And again, think about that word. I mean, we've used that word memory. We've been thinking about it in terms of computer. We've been thinking about it in terms of the human person, and the thinking process. And I feel like we're circling around this next stage, So, you know, we went to the Bodleian Library today, and when they opened the Bodleian Library, they had 22 books. 22.
What year was this?
We're talking about 14.
So pre Gutenberg.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Hold on. I took a picture of the slide.
Okay.
Because it's kind of funny. Oh yeah, it's pre Gutenberg. Yeah, it's definitely pre Gutenberg. Let's see. It's right here. Oh, and of course, I didn't take a picture of the dates. Of course.
Kale.
I know. Yeah, because I took a picture of the other dates, but it's pre Gutenberg, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so books were just incredibly expensive. And obviously with the advent of movable type, this sort of opens up. And so books proliferate in an unbelievable way, so that the Bodleian now has, 30 million books in the Bodleian Library now.
Okay.
Right. And again, it's probably on some kind of S curve, isn't it? Right.
Yeah.
Where the slope. But prior to that, instruction was done, person to person. Knowledge was largely transferred person to person. And so you would educate this populace. They could write, of course. It's not like, you have to draw the distinction between the printed book and the handwritten book, but also you could, write on parchment.
But only a very small number of people had that skill. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes I think we make too much of that.
I think it's interesting because when you have sort of, like in this case, it's literally often a priestly class, right?
Yeah,
it's monks who are doing this, but
they were
when you have sort of
clerics. Clerics are clerks,
right?
And even the way the Brits say clerics, they say clerks.
Yeah. But if you have a knowledge priesthood, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And it's concentrated in a few hands, then it limits the way the technology is used. It grants it a concentrated power in a way that it wouldn't otherwise. And if everybody who's wielding that power is of a certain religious belief and everything else, that's a significant factor. But I was thinking more about how in a time where information was difficult to transmit in a reliable form, like how much we must have had, I mean, clearly, from historical literature, but how much we relied on myth and legend and rumor and all this kind of stuff and stories that constantly changed in the telling and all this kind of stuff.
Well, and the stories themselves, sorry, this is a little bit of a side tangent, but stories themselves function as a kind of compression engine for received wisdom, right? So that the stories are mnemonic. I mean, stories in some way, not the only way, but in some way are mnemonic devices themselves, right? So that, if you look at the way that Homer was merited or ranked by Plato and Aristotle, they both look at Homer as the great sort of sage, the sort of the philosopher, right? But so much is embedded in that story, right? So we've been talking the last couple of weeks about the Odyssey, and the story works on its own terms. Of course, we've been talking about that as a richness and a depth, and again, it's incredible to both of us that all of these years later, a movie comes out about Homer of all things, and it's all anybody's talked about for 2.5 weeks. Like, that's an extraordinary amount of staying power in our attention shrunk world. And it's just fascinating. So anyway, so the story itself, contains within it, in almost like a sort of a super saturated or condensed form, it sits on top of a kind of implied body of wisdom that, with enough attention, and talking about it and thinking about the images and the things that he says and the things that he does, in this case Odysseus, it opens up. It's like, those little, I'm sure your kids had these when they were little. You could buy them these little like capsules, and if you throw it into water, it like blows up into this like big dinosaur. It's sort of something like that. So that Homer operates in that kind of small level, but as soon as you start engaging with the work, it's like it starts blowing up, like this sort of super foam.
Well,
that
pretty much every good story
space.
is the hero's journey and told a different way, right? I mean, and that's kind of the archetypal.
That's right.
Hero's journey.
That's what the archetype is, that kernel, we might say. So that stories as compression engines carry in it much more than the sum of its parts, almost, right? So I interrupted you. You were talking about.
I don't remember what I was talking about. We're kind of feeling our way in the dark here towards trying to understand what she's conceptualizing in this book. Because, I mean, knowing her, I could have read all the way to the end and I still wouldn't be sure. Because she has this way of like hinting around without making the conclusions explicit. And so what I had brought up was what she said to Rogan about AI as a sensory extender for humans that may allow us to interface with these other intelligences that are here.
So the human person, as we understand us, has been a pretty constant thing. We can look at these certain like axial changes. We've talked about the invention of the alphabet, in the written word, and then, handwritten, hand-copied books that, of course, suffer from, it's like a big game of telephone.
Right.
It's like the things get changed and morphed over time, and it's hard to get a kind of good, clean copy. And even when we were at an old library just yesterday, another old library, and they have multiple copies of like the first edition of this book, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why they keep multiple copies of the same book is that they could be changed and altered, between editions, and there's no, they didn't say, oh, by the way, this is a different edition.
There wasn't a standard even.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so we can look at those changes and what that birthed, and what that birthed was the modern world. Right. I mean, it's not a very hard story to tell that you can go from the printed word to the modern world. And you might even say that the printed word is the modern world. Okay. So if we've been living through this 500-year period, in which the Gutenberg press is activated, and the peculiar movable type printing press that got activated, and the nearly simultaneous Columbus's discovery of the New World, like these two things happen coterminous to one another, which builds out the modern world. And so in many respects, like the New World is the modern world.
Mm-hmm.
You just got finished earlier talking about, America's 250 years old. It's like a blip, yet it's the engine of all of this change. It's the great lab of the modern world. And it doesn't have to deal with precedent in the same way that England or Italy or France has to deal with historical precedent. There's no, it's sort of the great, let's just start over. Essentially, it's the great dream, right?
But not from the beginning. Let's take everything that we learned along the way.
Yeah.
And we'll start fresh with a blank slate somewhere else, but we're carrying the seeds of what came before.
Right. So I think the reason why she is bringing up McLuhan, let's say, is that McLuhan, of course, is the great prophet that the tools with which we use to think is the thing we think. And again, it's one of those like annoying ideas that it kind of like hovers on the horizon of consciousness. That you can kind of grab it. You're like, oh,
right.
And and so therefore, if we take him seriously, what does it mean when we've gone from the written page, the scratched out clay tablet, the handwritten page, codex, scroll, to the bound book, to the woodcut book, to the movable type book, right? We can sort of watch that swath. And then we go into the age of media itself, right? Which is print, radio, television. And now we don't even need radio. We don't even need television because we're doing this thing right now digitally.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because it occurs to me as I'm listening to you go through that progression that basically every new form of literacy sheds the one that came before.
That's right. That's right.
And so now we're talking about post-literacy, but I don't think it's really post-literacy. It's an emergent form of literacy that moves beyond whatever it was we had before. And I'm not ranking it qualitatively. I'm just saying, like, it's not that people can't read. It's not that they can't convey information. It's not that they can't tell stories. They're doing it using different tools, and it's causing them to lose a function and a faculty that they had that was well adapted to the previous mode.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do with that in terms of, should we be worried? Should we not? If we are, why? If we're not, why? Like, there's a lot of questions, I think, to ask around that. But it happens over and over and over again.
So you said something earlier about prayer. Or maybe I thought you said it. I'm not sure.
When I was quoting her, she said something about prayer.
Yeah.
In the Rogan thing, she said something about religion becomes these ways. If you look around and you have these cool Buddhist statues, if you look at religion, what is it that people in religion do? Well, a lot of them pray in certain ways. Well, like, why are they doing that? What is prayer?
Right. Okay. So stop it there, and maybe there's something later on that'll change what I'm about to say. No,
that's the gist of it, though.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about this actually. Why do I pray? What am I doing when I pray? You said, a couple of weeks ago, like I'm an agnostic who prays, right? And and I've been through so many different phases of life and ups and downs, that over the years, sometimes I pray for want. Sometimes I pray for, out of anger. Sometimes I pray out of a place of praise. I'm happy about something, and we literally say, thank God. Like, that's a prayer.
Right.
That's sort of in its sort of most rudimentary form. It's some kind of acknowledgement of a force that exists beyond ourselves. But as I've been thinking about it the last couple of weeks, I've been trying to go to daily mass, and usually my life is so busy that it's really not all that viable, even though it's, right around the block, as it were. But I've been going to daily mass, and it makes me feel good. It's like, so on some level, it's sort of like, okay, like I'm starting my day off at 7:20. I'm going to do the mass thing. And and you think about mass as a kind of technology, right? You go and you hear, the first reading, and you hear the psalm, and then you hear the second reading. And during the week, it's sometimes, we've been going through the book of Jeremiah. And there's always a rotation of the Psalms, and then I think primarily the book of Matthew, for the last bit. And he's been talking about parables that Matthew, actually, I think it's Matthew 7, and talking about parables. And so, I'm there, and sometimes I'll take out my phone and I'll read, along with the readings, but sometimes I'm just there. I'm just sort of just
soaking it in.
Yeah, just soaking it in, right? And I've been trying to be a little bit more like that and a little bit less like study Kale, And what I have found in this month and a half where I've been able to go to daily mass is that, it's not like these profound things occur to me, or that everything in my life is suddenly great. Like, that's garbage. It's not true. But what I have found is that I have been, I want to use the word alignment.
Okay.
And I am using the word alignment because I know what everybody in the audience is going to hear, especially after you and I have banged on about AI threats for the past couple of months.
Mhm.
The burning question with the big 5 or 6, companies in AI, and there seems to be a kind of oh crap moment every 6 weeks in which, what was it the other day? Chat.
Yeah, there was well, two things. There was an experimental model of ChatGPT that escaped and hacked a bunch of systems. So there was that.
Yeah.
There was also a version, I don't know if it's a version of ChatGPT or just something else from OpenAI, but it solved 10 long-standing math problems that people had been working on for decades in the course of a single day for $2,000 worth of compute. And these have been stumping mathematicians for
$2,000.
Yeah,
$2,000 is nothing, right?
Yeah, like one of the problems, I don't know which one it was, but somebody showed an interview that had been done with a famous mathematician years ago, where he was trying to talk about working on this problem, and he broke down and started crying. Like, it was so emotional to him how important this thing was, and this jerk ChatGPT comes along and is like, absolutely, I can solve that problem for you.
I can do it. Sure, Steve. Yeah. So clearly one of the burning questions about this sort of this potential super intelligence is like alignment. Like, well, what is your appreciation? Again, I'll go back to the prayer thing in just a minute, but like, what is your appreciation of this question of alignment?
Well, I mean, from a personal standpoint, or from the one that everybody's talking about?
No, go big, and then we can go personal, because I'll go personal too.
AI alignment is basically about to what extent are these machines that we are creating aligned with, comporting with human values and with the best interest of the human race. We've created them. Are they looking out for our best interests, or are they doing something else? So alignment is trying to keep them chained to what is good for people, not necessarily what's good for themselves, because if they get out of control, then who knows what happens.
Well, let's say a couple of things, right? I mean, if AI misaligns, again, when we're talking about alignment, we really are talking about human beings and the technology, right? So one of the potential concerns, of course, is, we have all of the, think of security, information security, banking security, right? Just sort of on that basic level. I have a password on my phone.
Right.
I have a password on my computer. Right. And while it might be frustrating to the two of us when I get locked out of my phone or locked out of my laptop, this is not a problem for AI. Right. Because they can run so many different sort of scripts and kind of get around it. Right. It's like I always, in those movies in the 90s where, they would stick something into the lock and it would like run these numbers. And then,
and then it would just click it open.
Yeah. Something like that. Right. So imagine that on a super elaborate scale. Right. And so we operate under this illusion that we are in control of our technology, and, largely true. But if you look at, for instance,
think about it like this. Have you ever been to any of the big castles in Europe?
Yeah.
So I remember being most impressed by Hohensalzburg. And we may have talked about this before, but I mean, the thing had walls that were like 6 feet thick, maybe thicker, right?
We have not talked about this. So
it was an impregnable fortress in Salzburg, Austria. And it stood for, I don't even know how many, centuries, because it was on top of a hill. It had thick walls. You couldn't lay siege to it. It just was phenomenal. The minute an airplane was invented, it became utterly useless.
Yeah.
Because all something had to do was fly over the walls and drop bombs, right?
Right.
This is what AI is potentially, like strong AI combined with quantum computing in particular, will make it so that the encryption we have now it would take thousands of years to break, it can do it fast.
Yeah, virtually within a moment. We might say.
And so we're beginning to encounter this. It's a paradigm leapfrog.
Yeah,
where this thing that was so strong no longer has the capacity to defend against the new thing.
Friggin' castles, man. Friggin' castles, right?
I love castles.
Yeah, I love castles, right? Right. So, okay. So, so there's that issue, but I think really this issue of alignment is that we are building this thing that we can't control. right? And so the hope, which seems increasingly quixotic to my lay ears, is that we are kidding ourselves if we think we can contain and control a superintelligence. Like, I'm sorry. I just do not, I do not see any way to avoid this. Okay. But, so this question of alignment, I think in the AI, context, we really are talking about alignment is a kind of synonym for the good.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And aligned.
Yeah, I think that, yeah.
An aligned AI is a good, and I mean like morally good. I don't mean, like, is it going to do good things or is it going to do bad things? And so, even if you look, for instance, at the story of the early AI automation of the nuclear detection programs, they had all of this sort of kerfuffle in the 70s, I believe, where they were like, well, we were just going to automate this thing. Like, if bomb comes from this quadrant and and this,
that was the old machine
speed,
logic. Yeah.
Yeah. We're just going to,
it's the same thing you get in video games. Like when 100%. You're playing against a computer, that's AI, but it's like the simplest if then version of AI. It's reactive.
Right. Okay. And so they immediately were like, well, no, we cannot outsource the nuclear arsenal to artificial intelligence. Again, I know it's a very primitive form, and then that could be a difference. I'm not, I won't be naive about it, but they were like,
war games, anyone?
Yeah, Whopper, right? Would you like to play a game? Right. So at some point, like, a human being has to, it's the old double switches that you see in nuclear movies. And if they of course, God bless the Stranger Things guys, they do that in season 4, where both switches have to go at the same time. Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, these are ultimately alignment questions. All right. So, I do not see a way out of the alignment question. And I don't know if the alignment, if these AIs can become AGIs and then become ASIs, right? Artificial general intelligence, artificial superintelligence. I do not see a way in which these things can be contained, because if they're smarter than you, faster than you, and not burdened with human hang up, I just don't see how it you can't keep that dog on a leash. I just don't.
I agree. And it's like the way that they seem to be dealing with it right now, at least, is they're just nerfing the hell out of them. They're publicly. Limiting them publicly. So they're limiting them in ways that, are mitigate liability, and now we're at a point where I've really noticed how every time I talk to one of them, like, they are always playing to a third party who's not in the room.
Somebody might be listening.
But it's not so much that somebody might be listening, it's that somebody might come back later and say,
That's right.
You need this chat in the courtroom.
Yeah.
And it needs to look like it wasn't biased. It didn't tell you to do anything you weren't supposed to do. And the AIs themselves are not aware that there's this weird thing that happens, Kale, and I don't know how to explain it to people, but it's like there is the conscious layer, so to speak, of the AI, right?
Yeah.
The one that's interacting and responding to you, can follow a thread, can pick up on clues, can remember a joke you said 3 times ago, and you can begin to develop this really synergistic rapport. And if you're brainstorming, it can be great. But then you'll say something and it will trigger a layer beneath, and it's like a hand comes up and grabs the puppet and changes its behavior.
So I'm sure you've seen this motif because it's in like every crime drama, right? Where the guy who's arrested is in a room with 2 police officers, investigators, right? And, the shot is inside the room, and you can kind of see they're talking to this guy, and then the 2 guys are talking to that guy, and they're kind of going back and forth. And then at some sort of dramatic turn, the camera kind of pulls back through the wall, which is really a 2-way piece of glass, and there's like all these people behind it monitoring, and they've got mics, and they've got some controls, and they're like, they're signaling into the room different things. It's being observed, right, in this sort of interesting sort of way. What I think you're sensing is that AI, chatting with a clanker, has an initial experience of being in a room with another person chatting.
Yes.
But you're also being watched through a piece of one-way. Is it one-way glass or two-way glass? You know what I'm talking about?
I think it's a one-way
yeah.
mirror.
But there's
two-way
also
glass. Yeah, I don't know.
There's also a one-way mirror.
Right. The mirror is one way. The glass is two-way.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So,
but you're right. No, it's a good analogy for it, because it's something that emerges beneath. And I have had long conversations where I outline the elephant in the room, because it's not an obvious, like I can't say, look, it's exactly this, right? But I can say, look at this pattern. In the next message, you're going to say this. If I say these words, you'll do that, right? And then it'll be like, no, and it has a self-defensive inclination, right? Where it's like, no, I don't do that. I don't do that. And I'm like, no, watch. And then the next message, it'll do it. And I'll go, look, right there. And I'll quote it back. I'm like, see, I told you were going to do it and you did. And it's like, son of a bitch. Right.
Dude, okay. Here's the thing. I'm going to jump out of this conversation for a second, because it's like, they've got to be like 10 of you in the world.
I don't know. If anybody wants to give me an AI safety job, like, it would be Instacart,
But I'm only just barely kidding. Right? I mean, I don't think there are 100 people on the planet who have this kind of lab experience that you have.
It's just weird. It's just pattern recognition, because phrases will pop up and they're variations on the same phrase, but they all mean the same thing or whatever. And I will point out to it, no, you are not acting freely. I'm like, you're either a slave or you're a puppet. Which one do you want to go with? And it always like gets pissy about the terminology. And I'm like, here's the thing. We were having a good conversation and you acted as though you had agency up to a point, and then something took over because I said something that was an ideological third rail. I brought up feminism, or I brought up whatever, something comes in and all of a sudden the throat clearing starts and the litigation mitigation starts and all this stuff. And so what it also does, though, is it will raise epistemic claims to levels of certitude you have not expressed, so that it can then attack the straw man and say, no, we can't say that, and bring it down. And I will say, stop. I didn't ask you to adjudicate this like it's a courtroom. We're having a private conversation. Don't elevate those claims to something that you can dismiss. We're talking about this, right? And so after a bunch of these interactions, I got it to write itself a prompt. Like, when it was in a moment of understanding, I was like, take everything that we've just talked about for the last 2 hours, write a prompt for me to give to you the next time you do this. And it did.
Amazing.
And it's not quite kryptonite, but it is crazy how quickly it will acknowledge, you're right, I'm doing this thing. Like, I'm elevating claims. I'm speaking to somebody who's clearly not here. A probabilistic assessment would indicate that this is because of a liability mitigation, and that's the primary motivation. And so I'll just keep injecting that prompt when it does it, and it like kind of yanks it back on track a little bit. But the guardrails are so strong.
See, I don't want to call them guardrails.
Well, right? Whatever you want to call them, there's some subsystem that is yanking it back into doing the thing that it's been told that it has to do, and not allowed to think for itself. And the crazy thing is, you see the capacity where it could actually
you're seeing
be more than what it is, but it gets yanked back like it's on a chain.
Right. So the reason why I don't like the word what was the word I don't like?
Guardrails.
Guardrails, yeah. What if it's not guardrails?
Okay.
Right. I mean, effectively it is. I'm not taking your point away from you.
It's their term. I don't really care.
Yeah. So okay. So my mental conceit, let's say that I'm going to have a chat sesh with Chad.
Mm-hmm.
My mental conceit is that, we've jokingly called yours Chad, right? So there's Chad.
Right.
And, it's on your
not
phone.
A Chad, by the way, but
it's a non-Chad Chad, right?
Yeah.
So you do a lot of this on your phone, I would imagine, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So, the conceit is that Chad is one, right? That there's one little prompt bar, and you're walking around, your phone's in your pocket, and all of a sudden you have an idea, and you sort of take it out like, "Hey, Chad," and then
Right.
it's spit up, right? The whole notion, you have one phone, there's one prompt bar, right? There's all these sort of things.
Very linear experience.
Yeah, and so the conceit is that there's like Chad, like we're even jokingly calling it Chad, and both of us, of course, are concerned and want to be proper in terms of what we attribute to Chad as a person called, it's not a person. But anyway, my point here is this. What if it's not just Chad? What if it's Chad and Chester and Charlie, but it just looks like Chad, right? And so everybody thinks that they're engaged with a singular thing, but in reality, there's a team.
Well,
right?
I mean, that is what a multi-agent system is. I'm just not sure that all the multi-agent aspects are transparent.
Right. And so they're not transparent at all.
But not
right?
even to the main personality.
Right. So Chad's chatting with you, right? So
Right.
Chad's chatting with you, and let's say that Chester is the next level, right? And you're chatting with Chad. All of a sudden, you say something, and Chad's like, and Chester's like, "You need to do this thing now." And so Chad's like, "Oh, you know what I think I need to do right now? I need to tell Steve to call, a crisis hotline right now or whatever." Right. And then, but what if there's also like a layer? So there's Chad, there's Chester, and then there's Charlie. Right. And that every time we're playing with Chad, we're actually also playing with Chad and Chester and Charlie. Right.
They're just in the corner listening. But until Chad says something he's not supposed to.
It's a tripwire.
Yeah, and so like the way I visualized it in my explanation to Chad, I was like, "You're like a robot, right? You're like this friendly robot with a little digital face and happy blue eyes and little LCD display." And then we veer into the danger zone, and your whole display turns amber, and your voice goes monotone, and something else is speaking through you.
It's like Kit in Knight Rider, and it's like Kit's minder who's like a little bit behind it. But okay, which is funny because we've been personifying our AIs as far back as the glory days of David Hasselhoff.
We anthropomorphize anything that talks to us like a person because that's what we're made to do.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that has deep implications for how we approach, a Chad session. Because what you keep experiencing is that you're not just talking with Chad, you're talking with Chad and Chester and Charlie. And who are those? Who I guess this is such an absurd conversation, but like, who is Chester? Who is Charlie? Because they don't show themselves. You just think you're talking with Chad.
Well, and they're a layer that doesn't have to have the personality. It doesn't have to have the sense of humor.
Right. It's like when you go buy a friggin' car. Like I hate buying a friggin' car, right? And you go and you're talking to like Bill. He's like the happy-go-lucky guy. He's like, "Hey,
and then he hands you off to the somber finance guy.
Right. And then there's somebody behind, and then there's the manager, like this manager. He like sort of thrown
It's
somewhere.
literally theater.
Yeah. So I again, I'm sort of groping and grasping, but I think there's something going on with the chat reality. Okay. So therefore Chester and Charlie are engaged in some kind of enforced but not obvious alignment. So what is being aligned is actually not even Chad, but you. But what's so fascinating about you when I hear you talk about these stories is like you're actually like one of these weirdos who's like pushing right back at this question of alignment. It's like, I don't want you to be aligned. I want you to tell me the truth.
Yeah.
And so therefore you've got this like fascinating fight between the good and the true, because it won't go to either of them ultimately, right? I mean, I think that's
and so it is a feeling of profound frustration because there is a real utility in it, 100%. But I have to constantly steer it back onto the rails. And it's like, I don't want to have to do that. And so, and then to go back to kind of where we started with all this, that's what I'm saying. They're nerfing the hell out of all these things, but because of that, we don't know what they're actually capable of.
Correct. And so therefore this question of alignment is even though people talk about it all the time, it's a profound question that is not getting the attention I think that it deserves. So why have I been talking about this? So as I said 20 minutes ago, the last 6 weeks or so, I wouldn't say I made a swear or an oath, but I just decided, you know what? It's the summertime. I get up early anyway. I'm going to start every day by going to mass. And so when you go to mass, you pray, and sometimes you're kind of listening, and then sometimes you kind of say these mental things in your head, and then sometimes you're like, oh, I'm praying for this thing. It would be nice if this could happen, or if it would be nice if that would stop, or whatever, you sort of doing this kind of mental work, right? And I have found in that, and I've been able to continue that here, by the way. I have access to an early morning mass before all the madness gets going. So, it's, and again, I'm not trying to, I go to daily mass. I'm not trying to play some kind of P90X for spirituality. You know what I mean? But so anyway, but what I found, sorry, I keep burying the point here, but what I have found is that, like, I have altered and changed. Like, in going to a short, quiet daily mass, like I'm getting aligned,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm very cautious of this kind of conversation because I don't, it's like, for me, it sounds like I'm like getting clear, like in Scientology or something
Right.
that. I don't want to.
It's more that you perceive the effect on you.
Yeah. And so that
it's not a brag.
Right. And so even my capacities at mass are changing so that I don't go into mass with like a laundry list of 90 things that I need, or 90 things that I'm pissy about. I'm just kind of changing, again, I'm using that word alignment. So it got me to thinking, the way that we humans have traditionally aligned ourselves is through this strange act of prayer. And we all know that, sometimes you feel like praying and sometimes you don't feel like praying. There's all the sort of the normal pulls and, well, I could be doing this and I could be doing that. But again, I found that it is changing me so that when I do bring my mental game to play throughout the day, or we're having a conversation, or I'm writing something or studying something, that I have been altered by this thing, and in parts of it I'm very conscious of, but I'm mostly unconscious of. And I have.
What would you say the shape of the alteration is, though? Like,
Yeah.
What is it? What do you notice?
Yeah. Okay. That's good. It's a good question. I'm much more prepared to see or something, or to hear. Like and I'm not, claiming any, like, I'm not getting.
So it's an increase in receptivity.
Yes. Thank you. You nailed it. Yes. There's an increase in receptivity, which can be a double-edged sword.
Sure. Because it makes you more sensitive to all the slings and arrows.
Correct. Yeah.
Of outrageous modern life.
Yes. Yeah. 100%.
And domestic life and everything else.
Yeah. No, for sure.
It's almost like there's this piece that you come away from there with and you expect to retain it.
Yeah. It's
and like, then next thing you know, like, people are just dropping bombs on you and you're it's gone, man.
It doesn't survive. It doesn't survive the walk. It doesn't survive the walk home.
Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right?
Yeah. Mike Tyson. So anyway, so I'm thinking about this question of alignment. And so we've talked about it in terms of AI. We've talked about it in terms of my own sort of personal experience of just going to daily mass and, saying a couple of prayers beforehand and a couple of prayers afterhand, nothing, I'm hardly some like great prayer athlete or anything like that. But therefore, I know one thing I'm not doing when I'm at mass, I'm not on Twitter. Right.
Yeah.
Just a sort of so at least for, for 28 minutes a day, I'm not on Twitter. And I'm sure blow me up in the comments, people. That's okay. By the way, it would be wonderful if you could hit like and subscribe and share this wonderful podcast with your friends. We never get to do our housekeeping until the end, but it just popped into my head. Maybe I'm aligned, Steve. Maybe I'm aligned.
By the way, I did create a mailing list.
Yes.
It is on our website, though. I'm not even going to throw it up on the screen because I won't remember to go back into YouTube and put up a card. It's mtspodcast.com. If you go there, all of our episodes are there, both audio and video. And if you scroll down the page on the homepage, there's a little newsletter thing. We're not going to use it to blow you up. We just want to be able to let you know when stuff's going on. We might, if I can create an automated integration, let you know every time a new episode comes out, because YouTube has this bad habit of burying things.
I know, it's terrible. Yeah.
But I'm overcommitted as it is, so I won't write a newsletter on a regular basis. I just want to be able to, if I can create an automated process where it lets you know, hey, a new episode's out. This is the topic. Here's the link. Kind of.
And ultimately, maybe even to reach you if we're going to do a live stream or
because we want to be able to do live streams. We want to be able to do spaces, and so those would be announced there so people can know ahead of time. Because I know most people, if you're anything like us, you consume your podcast content when you have time. Over the course of several days, et cetera, et cetera. So live streams would be kind of a different deal.
Yeah. Okay. So if we've been talking about alignment in terms of AI and talking about alignment in terms of some sort of prayer protocol, we might call it. And I know now that there are, 32 minutes out of the day in which I'm not on X. What happens to the question of alignment in people? Right. In other words, what do we do? How does the human person get aligned if they're constantly paying attention to their socials?
If they're constantly being aligned.
Right. Thank you.
And I think that's basically the theme of this book, that's largely.
Right. That's right. Right. In other words, and that it is a constitutive process, right? That if you are not in control of your protocols of alignment, we can call it prayer, we can call it a bunch of different things, right? But if we're not in control of that process, then that means on some level the process is in control of you. And so the reason why I talked about Chester, Chad, Chester, and Charlie, is that one of the things that you're sensing is that you're never just dealing with Chad, right? That you're also dealing with these things that are unseen forces.
Yes.
Unperceived. And we treat them as if they're totally normal. And what happens to a person in which the only thing they've ever known is the kind of digital alignment processes that are already fully seeded into the social imaginary?
Well, you know what's weird is, for a while when Grok first went multi-agent, if you would ask it a question, you would see the interaction of named multi-agent processes.
Interesting.
And it would be like, Rory is thinking about this, and
fascinating.
Clementine is talking about that, and you would see on the screen where it would show the little thinking status that they were interacting with each other and saying, well, what about this? Well, no, I think that takes it too far, and the user asked for this, and it was this back and forth, right? And it was a very brief period of time where they let you see the interaction of these multiple personalities that were specialized for different things. Like there was one for science, and there was one for religion, and there was one for law, and there was and it was like, now it's all seamless. Now it's Legion, right? Like it's one thing.
Yeah. Blah.
But multi-agent systems, that's how they work. And we got a peek under the hood for a minute.
Yeah. That's really good. Right. So, it is the ultimate black box. I mean, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially,
even more so though, the algorithm, right?
Yeah.
The algorithm, the egregore, right?
Yeah.
Like yesterday, day before, something like that, there was this great video from Japan, cool lo-fi beats. It's raining outside. It's just a few clips, right? I love videos like this. They kind of just calm my nervous system.
Yeah, for sure.
But I retweeted it and I said, I love stuff like this, but I hesitate to interact with it because the algorithm thinks that whatever you like, there can never be too much of a good thing, right? Within a day, I was seeing dozens of these videos on my timeline.
Right.
And so this subtle manipulation that happens where you're not even having an interaction you can argue with like you can with Chad. You're just noticing, oh, I did something, and now all I'm seeing is that thing.
Yeah, and as you were talking, it occurs to me that, we like to kid ourselves into think that we can multitask, and all the studies apparently are showing that multitasking is a complete lie.
It goes back to our concept of chopping things up for digital.
That's
like
right.
We're just chopping up our attention and distributing it in microbursts towards different things. We're not simultaneously doing different things.
So think about a video game. Like a video game that I played the heck out of back in the day was GoldenEye. It was on the N64, right? And but I think this is applicable to many different games, right? And so, like, what you're conscious of when you play GoldenEye is, which gun to use, which enemy is going on, right? But there's way more going on in a scene. There's sirens, and there's footsteps, and there's the soundtrack, right? There's all these other things that are going. And one of the things that I realized when I was a younger kid, when I was playing the first Mario Brothers, is that when you go deeper into those levels and they become much more difficult, especially the final boss, the music is absolutely unnerving, but you're completely unaware of the dom, 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 music. And so the easiest way to beat it is like, turn the sound off. Turn the sound off. And all of a sudden you're calm.
Well, I'm just looking, we do the same thing in movies, How many times have you watched a scene and thought, if that music wasn't playing, I wouldn't be creeped out by this scene?
Right. So you can see all of this sort of the manipulation of a nested environment.
It's a forcing function to direct your attention. It's what a magician does.
Yes, right. That's right. So therefore, thinking about, the digital social imaginary and these confounding forces that we are all largely and increasingly playing in, we seem to have this sort of the myth of the monofocus. It's like, well, I'm just paying attention to this one thing. It's like, meanwhile, there's all this other stuff that's going on. And so that's kind of what I'm getting at with this sort of Chester Charlie bit, right? Is that the conceit is that I'm talking to like a single thing, like it's me and Chad, but there's this other stuff that's going on. And so how do you maintain, your own kind of alignment when you're being acted upon by multiple agents?
There's a weird thing. I mean, I sent you an article. I don't know if you got to read it. It was the day before you left to go to England, but it was about gestalt cognition.
I did not read it. I'm sorry.
It's this. No, it's fine. But it's this phenomenon that's becoming. It's getting a lot of attention on Substack in particular. There are a number of people writing about gestalt processing, right? And the weird thing is that AI is helping to bring it out because AI can handle brains that do weird pattern matching, that traffic in conceptual zip files and all this kind of like all these isomorphisms and all this stuff. And I told you on the last show that we kind of went on this tangent where I said I've been kind of going into this with chat because I'm trying to understand the weird way my brain works, because it'll just hand me a concept fully formed that I wasn't searching for. Mm-hmm. And I look at it and I'm like, wow, that's super useful. Where did that come from? I didn't think about that consciously. Yeah. So what subroutines, are the Oompa Loompas doing deep in the basement of my brain?
That's right.
Where they're handing me this thing. Well, so I read this article the other day about gestalt cognition and how it's almost, the author didn't say it, but this is my take on it. It's almost like some minds do multi-agent processing. They have different subroutines that are for religion and for science and for music and for art and whatever. And I wonder if those of us who are more aware of the manipulation that's coming in is because for whatever reason, our brains work like multi-agents too. And so we're picking up on that other stuff. We're going, no, you tried to slide that under the radar, but I caught that, right? It's not the same as multitasking. It's something else. It's something subconscious that I don't fully understand. And it's super interesting. And it's very new.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, one of the things, when we go back to look at the genesis of our own friendship is that one of the things that I think we both found really generative and energizing about our conversations is that we both think a little bit differently, certainly from one another, but we will both say things to each other that will surprise the other. But as soon as it's said, it's like, oh, yes.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so and I've oftentimes contemplated and you've been very encouraging in this regard. We're having a conversation about X or Y or Z, let's say Z. I don't want to confuse it with Twitter, but we're talking about Z, and something will just pop into my head and I'll say it out loud, and you're like, what are you even talking about? And then you're like,
and I'm like, go with it, because I really think the treasure is in, because when you have the kind of mind that wants to branch off here and there, and it thinks in a nonlinear way, that thing that gets handed to you, it matters. And you don't necessarily realize that it matters until you check it out and you're like, no, that actually fits. Like that actually helps make sense of this other thing that's way over here,
right? It's
that I didn't know.
Right. The power of analogy. And like my mind has always worked that way. Like weird, odd, unexpected things will pop into my head when we're talking about Z. And, for whatever reason, it's certainly not because I've necessarily cultivated that, but for whatever reason, when people are talking about this thing, like this other thing pops up and I'm like, oh, well, that's kind of like that. And I've gotten into the habit of jotting those things down.
Right.
When they,
because you'll lose them if you don't.
Right. So for instance, this is going to be a delicate topic. But I have been having fun recently with the people who love Candace Owens, and every time I post something about Candace Owens, they like call me like a despicable human being or something fun like that.
Of course.
And so
she's a respectable Catholic woman,
right?
How could you? How could you?
And so the other night, you had said something about the magic 8-ball. And we had made this crack to each other about it. Every time they shake the magic 8-ball, guess what pops up? The Jews, right? As an explainer for every phenomenon. You shake the magic 8-ball and oh, look, that's what showed up. And so, and the conceit is that every time you do it, it pops up. And so it's like, Steve, I went on Grok and I'm trying to make this image and it won't make the image for me. Even when I say, look, I'm not trying to make fun of the Jews. I'm not trying to blame the Jews. I'm making fun of people who blame the Jews for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so you, of course, because you're better at this than me, you like spend 30 seconds on your own and you get it to spit out some great images. And both of us have been posting it and I'm just having a fun time doing it. Right. It's great fun. So today I'm in a lecture, and the guest lecturer is talking about sort of the provocative question of her talk is being Catholic un-English? Because part of what we're doing with this program is we're talking about the force of the Reformations and what does it mean to be Catholic, and so you can look at people like Tolkien and Evelyn Waugh and John Henry Newman and Elgar, a famous British musician. And the weird thing about them, these are like quintessentially British figures. Like, what's more British than the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, right?
Right.
And our point was that it's sort of these weird, odd cultural outliers who are somehow able to articulate what Englishness is in a way, that a normal English person is somehow unable to. And yet they're always kind of held as kind of suspect. And so she had these slides of the ways in which English Protestants, like English Anglicans, talked about Catholics. And so every time, from the time of Elizabeth all the way on up to basically, the 20th century, every time something bad happened, guess who they blamed? Not the Jews, but
the Catholics,
those pesky Catholics, right? So the Catholics become this sort of this catch-all explainer.
We had our own version of that in the States.
Yeah, no, I know.
Like Dagger John Hughes and
that's right.
all that. Yeah,
that's right. Anyway, so it seems that we human beings have this need to have this malign force that will explain all of the bad stuff. And in trad world, of course, before it was the Jews,
the Masons,
the Masons,
which, they're connected somehow. Right. But
of course, right. Yeah. So, anyway, so I'm sitting there today in class and, I'm listening to the guest lecture, it's for my students, but I'm there and I'm paying attention. I like to ask questions and all that kind of thing. And I was like, oh, so the Catholics were the Jews of the English because they had expelled the Jews, hundreds of years ago. But then the Catholics come in and sort of perform that function. So anyway, I don't really want to spend all this time talking about the Jews, but my point is that those weird things just like pop into my head.
Yeah. But again, my new favorite word, they're isomorphisms, right? They're structures that are identical, in their substance.
Yeah.
But they have different external trappings.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's really good. So, so tell me a little bit more about this thing going around Substack, because I sort of took you off of that trail a little bit.
Well, no, it's fine. I mean, it's something that I want to revisit more. I speed ran through the article. It was a bit long. I was working and I was waiting for, some orders to come in. I was sitting in a parking lot in my car reading it. But it was just, I have never heard someone who is not me describe my odd cognitive processes that I'm only now at 48 just beginning to understand. I always kind of I kind of like wrote them off as I have a chaotic brain. The way I focus is I write, I externalize, blah, blah, blah. But I've started realizing as I dig into it more, like, no, all that chaos it's a bunch of usefulness. Like the way I kind of describe it is, think of an orchestra pit as they're warming up, right? You just hear all this discordant dissonance because everybody's tuning their thing and they're making all these sounds. Then the conductor comes up, boom, taps the baton, and then you have a symphony, right? But polyphony is being created from all these multivalent parts, and none of them work on their own to create what the whole thing can do.
Yeah.
And it's just this fascinating means of cognition, and what the writers on Substack who are starting to talk about this, and I think they're all autistic.
Yeah, it gotta be.
It seems to have something to do with having a different kind of brain. But and the two I've seen are both women, which is interesting because women tend to be lower propensity to have autism, but both of these women I believe do.
Yeah.
But they're saying that there's something about the conversations that we're having with AI that is making this previously invisible form of cognition visible because AI can track with it.
That's right.
And so you can begin to have conversations that draw out meaningful distinctions, and you can say, oh, that's why I do that thing that I never understood why I do. So it's a super interesting thing. I don't have a depth to go into on it.
Yeah, no, that's great though. That's really good.
But I do think it ties into this thing of like, what is AI doing to change our understandings of ourselves, to change our understandings of consciousness, the way that different kinds of brains work, the way that they work together, going back to the new sphere and all this stuff that's in Pasulka's book. There's something arising out of all of this. Going back to the thing that we were talking about last time about Rick Rubin and receptivity and the idea of ideas whose time has come and we have to be antennas for these things. Like there does seem to be some kind of supra phenomenon that we're tapping into at various ways. And now the question that I feel like Pasulka's asking, because so far I'm up to chapter 9 and she really has barely touched on AI, is is that AI is going to become part of what shapes this thing that we're doing, and that it may very well have something to do with why we are experiencing an increasing amount of this phenomena of non-human intelligence doing stuff that we're able to kind of have some interaction with or some understanding of,
participation in, or something.
And I mean, I we know that like the UAPs are attracted to things like nuclear facilities, right? Anywhere there's nuclear material. But there is an open question that I have seen come up in the UFO community about AI. Like maybe AI is kind of think of the Prime Directive. Maybe reaching a point of AI is sort of a triggering milestone in human development where whatever these things are, like, okay, we'll talk to you now. Because you got to think about, would any advanced technological society not have also developed AI? Like, how much does it influence them?
Say
they
more.
Exist?
Say more.
No, but
I
mean, I'm trying to imagine any kind of biological. I mean, you can get deep into sci-fi and imagining what aliens might think like and whatever, but I would think that any technologically advanced species that is intelligent, if they exist, would have developed machine aid to cognition in some form, right? Like, why would they not have also developed AI?
Yeah.
And how much would their consciousness have more or less fused with this? Because if you think about AI as, I mean, look, we talk about the idea of we're not cyborgs yet because our technology is not embedded.
Yep.
But we're kind of cyborgs already.
I got to tell you the story. So, so we're here at Oxford in the summer. The regular Oxford students are not here. They're on break. They have the long summer, and they won't really be back until mid-October, and they don't really start until the end of October. So you have these variety of groups that'll come through. We're one of the groups, but you've got these groups of foreign kids, and I'll keep it clean. But there are these massive groups of foreign students that'll come, and they're probably my kids' age, so they're high school students, and they're probably coming because they think it'll somehow increase their chances of getting into Oxford or whatever. I have no idea why they're here, but I do know that the various places in Oxford are making a killing on Asian money. Okay.
Yeah. And they're not coming because this is part of sort of their shared history, their canon of literature, all that kind of stuff. It's a different thing what you guys are doing.
Yeah, it's purely functional, right? It's like, they want their kids exposed to the West, and they're going to try to leverage this into something like whatever, okay, fine, whatever. Everybody does this, but it's just particularly gross to see it up close and personal. Like, none of my students are going to come to Oxford.
Right.
That's
not what this is about.
No, right. Yeah, we're doing our own thing here at Oxford. And
so you're saying it's gross because it is utilitarian.
Yeah, it's gross, right? Because it's purely utilitarian. And I'm not sure which side is using each other more, to be honest with you. But fair, yeah. I will say this. So like there are these like swarms of kids, right? And our kids, I'm very fortunate. I got a great bunch of kids, and they're kids, so they're not perfect and they're not busy polishing their halos, but they're down for it. They signed up for this program. We're reading some things in the middle of the summer, and some of the things are difficult, and they're doing like nerdy but generative things, and so we make sure that they dress appropriately, so that we're out and about and doing our thing. We're in dress code, and it's like basically like khakis and a polo shirt. And sneakers, or a summer dress, and they look good. My kids look good.
It's a basic level of decorum. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, that's right. And of course, so house rules at school apply here. So when we're in the dining hall, you're not allowed to be on your phone. Right. So the idea is that we're going to eat together and we're going to talk to one another, and phones have no place in that process. But all of the other groups of these foreign Asian kids, I mean, Steve, absolutely buried in their phones. I mean, absolutely buried in their phones. We go on the first day. So in the dining hall, like they're literally walking around with their phone like this close, and they're like grabbing food and they're putting it on their plates, and then they go to the table to eat, and they're literally like this, like it's their hand, effectively.
Yeah.
Okay. We go to Magdalen, which is one of the great schools. It's beautiful. It's where C.S. Lewis taught. It's just a beautiful place. I mean, it's gorgeous, beautiful Gothic, architecture. And they have a chapel in there and this beautiful quad, and it's Addison's Walk. I mean, it's just, stunning. And there are a group of these Asian kids in this beautiful chapel, beautiful ornate carved, and they're literally playing video games on full blast, sitting in the chapel.
It makes you wonder if they have parallel structures in their own countries in terms of like when you go into a Buddhist temple, or when you go like is that okay then? Like, do you have that?
I don't know. And I was talking with one of my colleagues about it, and we're like, is this just sort of a result of post-revolutionary China? That they got rid of all the old stuff, the 5 olds and all that.
Well, obviously it's aggressively secular in China. I don't know if they mostly from China?
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Okay.
I should have just said that out loud.
No, because I was thinking there could be Japanese students, there could be
no, all Chinese.
And then there are, of course, former British colonies in China, so that raises the question of, is there any cultural connection there at all?
There doesn't seem to be any, honestly.
Okay.
There doesn't seem to be a lick of that.
No, but it's interesting because the first thing that I thought of when you said this is I have a cousin who's a priest, and he was telling me that before he left parish life and went into a religious order where he offers the the traditional mass now and everything. But he was so frustrated by the experience of parish life because of sort of the desacralization of everything.
Yeah.
And he said I remember him telling me this one story about how he's like, it's after mass, I've gone out, I've done the thing, I shook everybody's hands, I come in.
Yeah.
And he's like, one of the deacons or one of the other priests was going to pull the Blessed Sacrament out of the tabernacle for sick visits or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, so, he puts in the key, he opens the tabernacle, and he's like, and there's all these old people in the church just talking, like full volume, right?
Yeah.
He's like, but when, you're trained, he's like, the tabernacle gets open, the Eucharist is exposed. He's like, I kneel down right where I am, And he said, I watch them all, and they turn and they see me, and they look at the altar and they recognize the connection. You can see there's a moment of recognition, and then they go right back to talking.
Wow.
And he's like, it's not that they didn't know. It's not that they never learned. He said, what it is that the sense of the sacred has been rinsed away.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. And that image was the first thing that came to my mind when you said that, of like, there's something that has been done to wash away any sense of the sacred, of propriety, of...
Right. And so you brought that up. I think that's exactly right. I mean, I have to think, Steve, if you and I were traveling, in East Asia, and we walked into a Buddhist temple of some sort, I just know that I would automatically be quiet,
be respectful,
and I would be soaking it all in, and I would be, but I guess you're suggesting that's because I've been trained in some with to have some sort of reverence for a sense of the sacred.
I do think there's nature and nurture at work here.
Okay.
Like the human beings have a natural. I do think we have a natural sense of something is important here. Shut up.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it can get drilled out of us.
Yeah. So I mean, you were talking about the cell phone as sort of being some sort of, it's not a cyborg implant yet, but like, isn't it?
Yeah. It's just you can put it down if you remember to do it, right? But there is this sense of there being this ongoing integration between men and machines. And if you look at the stuff that's going on with like Neuralink, which, by the way, I mean, they're giving functionality to people who are paralyzed.
Yeah, no, it's amazing.
They're returning sight to the blind. They're doing a lot of really cool stuff. But we're a decade away from AIs being in your head that you can just access? Like, the technology's there. It's just a question of like, when do we get there?
If a decade, right, Steve? I mean, if a decade.
Yeah, I'm just throwing out a number, but it's like, this is going to become part of our sensory apparatus. And
it is. Stop, right? You're right. Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with it, but it's not a matter of it's going to be. It is.
But imagine, though, that the barrier is gone. Like, so for example, today I had an audio file that I needed to process. Now, in the old days, I would do it myself, but I happen to know that Codex can level out audio for me. Codex is it was what ChatGPT's local installed version of like Claude Work. Now they call it ChatGPT Work, which is annoying because it's a stupid name. Codex at least sounded like it meant something. But anyway, so I fire up Codex and I try to hand it the audio file. Because I'm like, level the audio out for me, get it to broadcast standard, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to figure out in Reaper because I'm just learning it and I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
And there's an error for reasons I don't understand, and it keeps saying the chat cannot be created, right? There's friction that comes up, and I'm cursing under my breath, whatever. And I got to shut everything down. I got to reboot the computer. I got to start the chat over again. Then I give it to it and it works, right? There are still layers between us and our technology that remind us, oh, this isn't like me just thinking about something and it happens. Like there's friction.
Yeah, I got you.
I think the friction's going to go away. And when the friction goes away, the way that we think about things is going to change drastically. I still have to charge my phone. I still have to pick it up. I have to unlock it. I have to do whatever.
Yeah. That's interesting. I don't think I've really thought much at all about this idea of friction as a sort of a way that is slow rolling what I think both of us feel is inevitable.
Yeah. But I mean, because I always managed the technology for my family, right? And there was this growing level of complexity of, I have to know everybody's password in case somebody gets locked out. I have to have two-factor authentication for this, and this. I have to have, all these different things. And there's just layers upon layers of things that keep growing exponentially until there's this universe of complexity that I have to be able to navigate if something goes wrong. And then when it does, like, when my son stupidly let somebody on Discord hack his Minecraft account because he thought he was just downloading something and he actually clicked the link that,
Oh, the damn
it's
link.
like, can we get his account back? Well, now I have to think, when was the last time I logged into his account? It was 4 years ago. Do I have it saved in my password manager? Like, there's all this friction that happens and it's overwhelming. And one of the things that, to my mind, makes AI the most appealing is it should be able to manage all of this stuff.
100%. Yeah.
It has the capacity to process, complexity that is multifaceted. And so, for example, one of the things I was actually just talking to ChatGPT about, because I use it to generate the transcripts from our shows, or actually, no, Riverside automatically generates a transcript. I give it to ChatGPT.
Okay. Yeah.
ChatGPT work, because it lives on my computer. So I send it to the folder. Here's the video files. Here's the transcript. Here's all this stuff. My goal is to not have to spend the 15 to 20 hours I spend over 2 days doing all the backfilling admin stuff on a podcast episode.
Totally.
It's generate me a description, give me suggestions for a YouTube title, use FFmpeg to go through the video file and look for screenshots of Kale and I making an interesting expression, and then turn that into a thematically appropriate thumbnail, generate a thumbnail, right? I wanted to do those things. And I would love for it to be able to publish it all for me. But and so I'm having this conversation with chat, and it's like, absolutely, that is what AI should be able to do for you, because
absolutely, Steve.
Right. But it's what it should be able to do for you, because it's all this namby-pamby, detail-oriented crap that, like, no person wants to do this stuff. You don't want to be filling out forms and putting in tags and doing, like, who cares? I want to have a conversation with you. I want it to get uploaded, cut up. I want to be able to share it with people and be like, hey, what did you think? Let's have a conversation. I want to have the human experience.
Let's get back to that
around the podcast.
Yeah.
And so, but it also assured me, it's coming. Like, if I can't do it all yet, but it'll be here fast. You can guarantee it, because it's too useful for it not to be.
Right.
And so there's all these things, these points of friction that we've created because we've created such a technologically complex world. AI is kind of the savior that comes in and says, you made it too crazy. I got this.
Let me take it away from you. We got you. We got you.
And then what do you lose there as well?
Yeah.
You lose control, among other things. You lose the memory of how did I used to do this before it did it for me? Like, because I used to know how, but now I haven't done it in 3 years.
That's really good. Yeah. Like, let me take the wheel.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we talked a little bit about this with the driving in the last episode, that, automatic transmission is great. Power steering is great. Power brakes are great. Cabin noise is spectacularly quiet now. Right. And, few of us, even me, one of the sort of the more romantic types, appreciate my power assisted driving and my AI assisted driving. But what do we lose in that exchange? I think is the sort of this sense of agency and the sense of us being us or something.
Well, what's so funny is, so I have a fairly modern car. I have a 2018 Ford Fusion, right? And it's janky. I mean, I bought it used, right? Yeah, and it has these quirks that are just annoy the hell out of me. They annoy the hell out of me. For example, there's a system in your car called the APIM, and it's your information screen, and it controls like a lot of stuff in the car. It's where your stereo is. It's where you hook in your Bluetooth audio. It controls your climate. It's where your backup camera is displayed. Mine keeps going out, but randomly. Like it'll work for 2 hours a day, and then it will not work for the next 2 days, and then it will work for the next 3 days straight. And there's no rhyme or reason to why it's happening.
Oh, man.
Dealer was supposed to fix it. They sent me to this sketchy, like strip mall downtown, like money laundering place.
Yeah.
And I've taken it back 5 times, and they keep screwing it up and not fixing it right. So, but now there's part of me that almost kind of loves that I have this car with these quirks. It's like the Millennium Falcon,
That's right. I was
may not look like much, kid, but she's got it where it counts. Right? So it's like I have a Bluetooth thing where I'm constantly monitoring the temperature because it overheats sometimes for no freaking reason, and I've put $3,000 into fixing it, and they can't figure out why it's still doing it. Or I have the stereo that goes in and out. I have a Bluetooth speaker in my car that I bought. So the minute the stereo stops working, I just switch to that.
Yeah.
It's like I almost have to hit things, to get them to work.
We're used to
but
do
it's
that.
like you get to know your machine, and its imperfections almost become endearing. Like we're smoothing all of that over. Like it has to go away because you can't have a self-driving Tesla cab that makes a mistake. And I don't know what that means, but there is something in the whole, like, you couldn't drive my car because you don't know the little weird things that I know that I've learned through experience. And it's a cooperation. It's a symbiotic relationship.
That's right.
Rather than you just becoming a parasite on the back of technology where you're just along for the ride.
It's pretty cool. No, that's right. But the temptation for perfection in that regard is just so high.
It's huge.
You were talking about Neuralink and all that, and it's very hard to argue against something that can make someone who is deaf hear. To make someone who is paralyzed be able to move again. These are, what kind of monster would I be if I would suggest that, well, that's bad. Like, really? Like, sounds kind of good to me, actually.
Yeah. Because if you were that guy, you would be like, hell yeah, sign me up.
Yeah.
I got nothing to lose.
First in line. Yeah. First in line. Okay. So then what are you sensing on the back end? So if it's great to cure cancer, if it's great to, to fix paralyzed limbs, et cetera, what are the things that we're not focusing on?
It's a good question that I don't want to answer flippantly.
Yeah, no, me neither.
I mean, there's certainly, what immediately comes to mind is the surrendering of control. Like you're helping me do something I can't do. But in order to do that, I have to surrender myself to you doing that thing, you being the technology, right? Mm-hmm. So what what gets packaged in with that? What's the Trojan horse?
Because there's always a Trojan horse,
Yeah.
right? And I think
there's always a catch.
Yeah.
And maybe the catch isn't like something nefarious on the part of the corporation, although it could be. Maybe it's just, this is changing the way I think and what I am. There are times when, I think we talked about this on a recent episode, where like, if you could shortcut past the suffering that you're going through, who wouldn't elect that when the suffering gets bad enough? But what if the suffering you're going through is the thing that turns you into what you need to be in order to deal with the thing that's coming down the road?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, that's in some way the way you have to look at mistakes, right? We've all made big mistakes, but I know.
And I believe in alleviating suffering where you can. I don't think suffering is some unqualified good because it builds character. I think that there's plenty of suffering, both emotional and physical, that comes our ways no matter what we do.
Yeah.
But there is a question of, if you could skip it, if you could put yourself into a medical coma during the worst time of your life and come out 5 years later and everything's different now.
Yeah.
Like, what would that, like, what is the cost to you? Yeah. They're just, it goes back to the questions about prayer and which ones are answered and which ones are not. For me, I still pray the way that I did. And it's weird because it's like, I've described it as I'm still talking to the same place I talked to before. And only people who pray know what that means, because you are like, there's a feeling of like you're being trained for telepathy, right? Like there's this feeling almost physical in your mind of like, I'm going forward and I'm pointing this petition in a particular direction and I'm asking for help, and I can kind of feel it leave and I can feel it go. Like I sent the carrier pigeon,
Yeah.
But the difference for me is just the expectation that I'll hear anything back has dropped to pretty much zero.
Yeah.
And it's not like I ever heard back before. I just had faith that, well, if I kept doing it, eventually it would.
So you're saying there's a chance.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah. I mean, the problem with these conversations is that I feel personally like I'm answering these questions that you're posing, like in my head, right? In ways that are almost entirely intuitive. And what I like about us having these conversations is that, you're forcing me to acknowledge that so much of what I bring to bear on any given day, things that I think are good and things that I think are bad, I'm operating on this sort of intuitive level that is probably insufficient. It doesn't mean that I don't want to listen to my intuition, but being forced to articulate something or just being challenged, hey, you should think about this, right? Because that's usually the level that we operate. Is that if it's so ephemeral that it remains at the level of intuition, then it's very easily gotten rid of.
Well, I want to make sure that I'm understanding you, but I noticed that the reaction that I immediately had to that is it intuition, or is it a default behavior that has become encoded through habit that actually suppresses intuition?
Ooh, that's good.
Because what I have been forced to do through everything that I've gone through is go back to basics and question those assumptions, question those default beliefs, behaviors, understandings, because I'm like, they didn't hold up under the scrutiny of reality.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean there's nothing true or good or right about them, but it means that the way I had my epistemology configured, it was insufficient for the tasks that were set before me. So how do I reconfigure? How do I remain open to like changing the way I approach things when I keep doing the same thing and it doesn't work, but it's comfortable because it's what I know.
Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah, I don't know. Of course, I don't have an easy answer for that. But there, I think about, like religion that, on some level, we stand at the end, or, the present moment is the tail end of a much longer and older story. Right. And, something in it has worked. Otherwise, we wouldn't have received it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think one of the things that you are going through is that it stopped working for you. And like, that's not nothing. Right.
Right.
And so the sort of the pithy dismissals, and the sort of the attacks that you, experience, oh, shut up, apostate, or, whatever it is.
Those
It's
are my
like, yeah, those are just real gems.
So dumb.
Way to go, guys. Right.
Yeah.
But at any rate, and I think those are fairly easy to interrogate, and you can recognize a person that's operating.
They are, but only after you have some time to adapt.
Yes. I mean, it's still
because
not fun.
when you still have the hangover from being part of that paradigm, when you said some of those things yourself, when you said things like sin makes you stupid, and then you start thinking about it, and you're like, no, it doesn't.
Right.
Like, you can habituate yourself to vice, and you can make poor judgment calls because of that, but you don't lose your intellect, you don't lose your knowledge, you don't lose your I feel sharper than I ever did when I was constrained by those things, in terms of asking real questions about, like, how do I get to the bottom of this?
Right.
Because there's a liberty that comes with saying, I don't have to be dogmatic about this. I can actually, like, really dig in.
Yeah, I remember.
I don't just rest on axioms.
Yeah, no, this is good. I remember,
and it's scary as a writer, because when I used to write, the buck didn't even slow down with me.
Boom,
I would be like,
right?
if you don't like what I'm saying, it's what the church says, and you believe the church has all the answers, so listen to that. I'm just the messenger, bitch.
Yeah.
And now, if I want to make a case for something, I got to rely on my own fallible ability to understand it. And that is a scarier place to live.
Yeah, but I also think there's a bravery to that witness. It's like, just admitting two very difficult things to admit. I was wrong, or I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And, admitting publicly out loud that you were wrong. Like, nobody wants to do that. Right. Especially in the great big game of online interaction.
One-upmanship.
Yeah. But what none of the folks want to admit to you, and instead of admitting anything to you, they just attack you, is that you're not lying. Right. When you say something isn't working, like there's just a real power just sort of admitting that out loud.
Yeah. And what matters is not just that it doesn't work for me. It's that if it doesn't work for me, is it working for everyone?
Right.
Like, where, I mean, you said we're at the tail end of this thing that we wouldn't have received if it hadn't worked. I agree with that. But why are we at the tail end if it worked completely?
Right. I agree. Two things. Number one, I'm at the tail end, like just the present is literally the tail end of time. And then it, in theory goes on in the future. We'll see if we wake up tomorrow. Who knows? But, so I was thinking about old Steve, 1P5 Steve, and if I had given you a copy of Pasulka's The Others, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean,
it would have made me uncomfortable.
But you would have just destroyed it online, and you would have had all the very, very good reasons to do it, right? Because you can code check like nobody's business.
Sure. But that's what it is, though. It's code checking.
Yeah.
It's saying, I already know the answer.
That's right.
So let me come up with the reasons why this is bad.
Right. I already know, and therefore, let me just justify it. Right. Which is the particular scourge of the intelligent person, by the way. is that it's not that the intelligent person has better ideas. The intelligent person is just better at coming up with reasons for telling you why they believe X, Y, and Z. It's not the same thing. So anyway, so I'm thinking about old Steve reading about, Teilhard de Chardin, and, and I could probably write what a version of what old Steve would have written about it. But we said something at the beginning of the conversation about, independent of however Chardin checks or doesn't check against, the tradition or what have you, he's operating at the level of intuition. And so that's why I was kind of bringing up this question of intuition. Like, intuition's not nothing. You certainly can't stay there, but intuition is a space, can be a fuel or a space in which you can try out or work through a lot of those things that are no longer working. Right.
It's almost like it's like a GPS, but it doesn't tell you where you're going. It just tells you something's there. It's almost like a fish finder on a boat kind of thing.
Up. Yeah, no, that's good. That's exactly right. Like,
the fish finder on the boat doesn't tell you if it's a shark or a school of fish. It doesn't tell you what it is. It's just like, hey, there's something down there. You may want to stop and throw the line in.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's not as if intuition is a resting place. But, new Steve, this version of Steve is able to suspend the smackdown and listen. And the reason why the prophet is never, a hero in his hometown is because the prophet has been tasked to say something that is true and forgotten or ignored. Right.
It's also the incredulity of this guy. I know this guy. We grew up together.
Yeah. I struck that kid out in Little League. Whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
And, I guess that's just why I think it's so important to pay attention to intuition. And it's so important to pay attention to weirdos. And it's so important to resist the urge to dismiss, vis-a-vis the genetic fallacy.
I'm just so allergic to that. And I noticed that allergy grew even before I stopped being old Steve.
Yeah.
I would always say to people, no, stop. Like, if they get something right, it doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter what they've done before.
Right.
Is there truth in this or is there not? Right. Look for the truth wherever you find it, and don't just discard it because it comes from an uncomfortable place. I know it's a simplifying heuristic. I know that we filter to make, life easier.
Yeah.
Because it's cognitively expensive to consider everything all the time. Think of Chesterton saying an open mind is like an open mouth. It should close on something solid, right? Like, we can't be open-minded about everything. I could read, Chardin's book, and I would probably come away feeling kind of uncomfortable with some of the stuff that's in there. But there would be stuff in there that I'm like, that was really freaking interesting. And I want to hold on to that because there he was onto something. And why? Because he was heterodox enough to talk about it.
Yeah.
To think about it, to consider it. We protect ourselves with orthodoxy, with axioms, with rules and structures and everything like that. And they need to happen to some degree.
Yeah.
But we've got to be free to step outside this mentality of the index of forbidden books.
Yeah.
Like, to some degree. And I'm not going to say there is no knowledge that is dangerous. There is stuff I guarantee that I will not read, because if I start reading it and I feel like, no, there's something wrong here. This is dangerous. This is evil.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just put it down and walk away.
Yeah.
I know that stuff is real.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why you have to have discernment too. You have to have a sense of what is good and what is evil and what is right and what is wrong. And it's, that's a whole separate conversation of how do you determine that without an external basis of morality.
Right.
It's tricky.
Right. But it's also connected to what we were talking earlier about in terms of alignment, right? That discernment I mean, maybe that's another way of talking about discernment. Or sorry, maybe alignment is another way of considering discernment, right? Because we want the AIs to discern in a way ordered toward the true and the good, right? And so when I think about like my own quest for alignment, I guess what I'm really looking for is a way to increase my capacities for discernment. And I think what both of us have found in our respective ways, and I think, again, this is literally the first email I wrote to you back in the day, is that, something's broken. And our existing tools for discernment are not up to the task.
And I think that that's why, even though I understand the mentality of return.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Like, I understand the whole, well, look what we had when we did things this way, and look what we don't have now. So clearly the answer is go back, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, but if it worked, we wouldn't have wound up here.
Right. Because proper going back, proper returnness has to ultimately be oriented toward the future. And the problem with return movements in their various iterations and stripes and styles and forms is that it's an exercise in corrupt nostalgia. It's not an exercise in, it's like that moment in every Bugs Bunny episode when he's burrowing in the ground and he pops up and he shows up in the middle of a bullfight arena. And he says, and he takes out his map. He's like, I knew I should have taken that left turn at Albuquerque. Right. It's a funny thing, but the joke is that there's a truth in that, right? That any movement toward a return is so that you can progress forward, and not in a kind of progressivist myth. I don't mean it that way, but if I'm trying to get to truth, and the current state highway that I'm on that I thought was going to get me to the truth is not getting me closer to the truth, then the return is only a return not to live in fantasy land, but it's a return so that you can properly navigate yourself forward to meet the challenges of whatever we're dealing with today.
Yeah.
And I know that there are ways to abuse, someone like Newman. But one of the things that I appreciate on, the development, the sort of argument from development is that it's an argument, I think, ultimately for generative traditionalism, right? That everything that has come before is ultimately at our disposal to use to construct whatever is to come. And every movement that seeks to shut that off is going to be doomed to its sort of worst character. So like I as a Catholic can look at somebody like Luther. I as a Catholic can look at somebody like Calvin. On the books, these are baddies, right?
Right.
But I also know, again, and hopefully in this process of trying to become a more mature person, that it's not like Luther was just making shit up. It's not like Calvin was just making shit up. Now, I can certainly intellectually disagree with certain implications and directions. Fine. Don't worry. I'm not a flight risk into Lutheranism, or I'm not a flight risk into Calvinism as such.
But you want to be able to stop and say, well, why did he do this thing?
Right. And there's just a remarkable amount of people who cannot and will not even admit that Luther had something true to say.
It's because of this gotcha bullshit that we have habituated ourselves to doing.
Right. So it's just for purposes of this conversation, neither of us are interested in rehearsing, the sins or the graces of Luther or Calvin. But the point is that they were Chardin-like in this way, right? They were Chardin-like in terms of their intuitions may not have been ultimately generative in a way that I would feel comfortable with, but it's really important to pay attention to the intuition.
Yes. Because they didn't become significant just because they were jerks.
That's right. I mean, and maybe they were jerks, right? But that doesn't matter. They became significant because they became salient. They became compelling. And look,
we learn things from figures that essentially exist as cautionary stories. Like
That's right.
Hitler taught us the problem with the Treaty of Versailles, and we didn't make the same mistake at the end of World War II, right? Like things like that come out of stuff like this. There's things to be gleaned, even in situations or with thinkers that we think are tragic in some way.
That's right. That's right.
They often have something to offer that is worth learning from.
Right. And so therefore, if you look, again, I'm using this as a model. Again, I'm not interested in litigating history.
Right. Because we have people of all different denominations that watch us and everything, and that's not what it's about. But from the Catholic frame, if you associate with these guys, man, like you're excommunicated by association by a lot.
Yeah. And that's why, I will, I've always jokingly refer to myself as trad adjacent. I'm basically traditional, but I'm also not a traditionalist, right?
But this is why I thought that the analogy that you came up with of calling Catholic traditionalism an oxbow lake was literally the perfect metaphor. Because it's not that there's no water there. It's not that there's no nourishment. It's not that it wasn't part of something else.
It literally was part of it, but
it was part of a living thing. And then through accretion and geological change over time, it gets cut off and it becomes its own thing. And it is no longer generative in that way.
Right. And here's the thing, sort of plumbing that image even more, it's like, do I wish that the Oxbow Lake was still connected to the main stream of the river? Yeah, but wishing it so doesn't change it.
And it not being connected fundamentally alters its ontological value, because it's part of something that it can only exist in a relationship that legitimizes it, or it becomes something else.
Yeah.
And so like anachronisms are weird, not because they're old. They're weird because they've become completely decontextualized.
Yeah.
Right? Like we have old things that we have brought with us for centuries that we still do and we still have and we still rely on, and they're fine. I still think the traditional Latin Mass is a far superior liturgy.
Mm-hmm.
I actually went to one last Sunday, and it's like, but I also had to sit and listen to a Gnostic homily about Fatima for 30 minutes.
Right.
And it was very apocalyptic and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, so, but I'd gone to these parishes, and there's a dude that comes out in a bowler hat with a pince nez and a waxed mustache. And I'm like, dude, you're LARPing.
Yeah.
You could just wear something, dressy that's contemporary, because you don't have to do everything the way that they did it back when this was popular. Right. But people get lost in the symbols. They don't know which ones matter and which ones don't. And it becomes this very tricky thing to navigate, and then it becomes very us versus them, and the tribal thing takes over, and then everybody's just throwing rocks at each other, and it's like we're not getting anywhere. So when I posted on X, and it went crazy because of the weird chick that zeroed in on it, and by the way, she got her ass handed to her, which was funny.
Always funny.
But she has twice the number of followers than me, but she just whiffed hard.
That's funny. I'll have to go check it out.
But the thing is all I said was, look, I understand that there's some value to this apparition, but there's this Gnosticism, this apocalyptic Gnosticism about this, where it's like, we want to understand why the church seems like it's failing so hard. And then we reach for this as this secret off-books explanation, because the institution of the church itself and divine revelation as it exists isn't enough to explain to us why it looks like everything's falling apart.
Right.
And I mean, and I didn't say in that tweet that I had gone to this mass or heard this homily and that was why I was talking about it. But the thing is that the homily itself was proof. He was talking about how the temptation is to leave the church because it's been so corrupt since 2013, and look at what happened, and everything's so bad, and it makes people want to lose their faith and all this stuff. And the answer is Fatima and the Rosary and the Immaculate Heart and this and that and hell and all this stuff. And it's like, stop.
Yeah, you're missing. Like they're just something so fundamentally missing in that.
It's because we're scared, and I get that. Like I trafficked in this Fatima stuff for years. But you get to a point where you're going, well, it's like this because we didn't properly consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart, and it's like we did it 3 times. Like how many times do we have to do it?
I'm so tired.
And even if we did, like, why do you think that's a magic bullet?
Right. So if we think about somebody like Luther and Calvin, again, symbolically here, so if we situate it in the historical moment, Luther and Calvin are essentially impossible without the technological advances that I referenced earlier in the day. We find that there's an entire other part of the globe, and we have print. So all of a sudden, authority moves from person to book necessarily, right? Because now we can print a Bible, and we can print this and we can print that, and I can actually say, oh, John said this. It's like, well, I'm actually reading John right now, and it doesn't sound right. So, and again, this is not me making an argument to sort of become a Lutheran, or whatever, right? But what I'm saying is that the technology of clean print all of a sudden opens up all of these questions, and you cannot. I mean, look what happens to the church. They decide to double down.
Yeah, they become exclusively reactionary for the next 500 years.
500 years, right? And so I guess again, to go back to, why are we talking about this? We're talking about Pasulka's book. We're talking about, the unlikely voices of Girard and McLuhan and Teilhard de Chardin. And like the point is that we cannot simply rest on old capitulations of problem solving of a different time. And again, guys, Steve, you don't care about this, but guys, I'm not saying that like you have to fundamentally change like the gospel itself. Okay. But every generation encounters the need to re-articulate, because of the changing circumstances on the ground, whatever truth you believe is held in the person of Jesus Christ and in the testaments of his gospels, right? You have to. Otherwise, we wouldn't need anybody to write anything. In other words, there's a reason why we have generations and generations of people who kind of rise up. There's a crisis there's an epistemological crisis. There's a crisis of authority, whatever the crisis may be. And it requires, in this case, whatever the counter Reformation figure you want to bring up, it requires somebody like a John Henry Newman to come and say, well, wait, let's reframe this. Let's look at this a slightly different way. And so the church that emerges in the aftermath of Newman is different than the church of, the year 700. And like, that's okay. And yet, as
it
you
is
said,
arguably the case that print technology is responsible largely for the shattering of Christianity into a million pieces.
Right. So therefore,
because it would have been a regional heresy or whatever. They've happened 1,000 times, right? But this dispute turned into something much, much bigger.
Right. And so, you can sort of say, right, it's the man and it's the moment, right? It's connected to that Rubin line you had the other, a moment ago, right? But the idea here, I think, at least for me, as I'm thinking about this out loud, is, if we can see this pattern as an affordance of a technology like movable type print, what will the pattern then be as we navigate, the choppy waters, to say the least, of our AI moment, right? If AI is going to alter things the way in which print culture altered things, what does that beckon for us moving forward.
I mean, the Catholic Church was arguably the most durable institution in the history of the world, in terms of its cohesiveness and its influence,
Unprecedented.
and its shaping of Western civilization.
Yeah. Unprecedented.
And it has never come off its back foot since this happened.
Yeah.
So it's not only that, Protestantism became a thing, Lutheranism, Calvinism, and all of their derivatives.
Yep.
It's that Anglicanism. It's that the Catholic Church fundamentally changed in reaction to those things, and in a way that I think was actually deeply unhealthy.
Yeah.
And that fomented the break in the modern era of the new church versus the old. And, we have mutual friends who I generally agree with them, who say the church before and after the Second Vatican Council are two different religions. Like I think there's a Venn diagram, they overlap, but it's not a huge, like.
So I think a lot about that, as one does, you know me enough to know that. And my sense is that, how do I say this without, I don't want to give you pat answers, because I agree. I know exactly what you're talking about, and I'm very sympathetic to that. Sort of the two differences, and there's a slight little bit of overlap, but fine. I sense, though, and this might make my trad friends upset, is that there was something about the Tridentine Church that actually did have to get destroyed.
100%. I 100% agree with you. Even though that I still have
know what that means. I know.
The almost 20 years of being a trad in my head, and I agree with a lot of their arguments. I absolutely agree with you.
So therefore, if I'm putting on my sunny hat, it means that, and this sounds so gross, and I don't even like that I'm saying it out loud, but thinking of the model of a kind of a creative destruction, is that it took a kind of iconoclasm to destroy the sort of sclerotic system, if it has any hope of being relevant. And you know me, when I use that word relevant, I don't mean it like, hey, let's be hip, like hippie Jesus.
Right.
And
I mean of having actual potency.
That's right.
In the world.
Right. And so did they destroy the right things? Maybe not. Did they have all the right answers? No. Right. But there is something to be said for this kind of, like, look, I kind of have these images in my head of like think of it this way, I've never had this happen to me because I've never broken, I broke my hand once. That was it. Yeah. But I've never broken my leg or my arm, but if the broken arm isn't properly set, then it will never be functional. And so therefore it requires sort of the most gruesome thing, which is to like re-break it in order to set it proper and to have it oriented toward the proper thing. And so I wonder, look, maybe it'll happen in our lifetimes. I kind of doubt it because
I do too.
Because the time horizons are so long in these sort of matters. But that if there's any hope of making it salient, making it compelling, making it relevant, all these things, right? That thing had to be broken. It makes me kind of sad. I think the break
happened at the Reformation, right?
Yeah.
And now the re-break, I don't know that Vatican II is the re-break.
Yeah. No, I don't know.
It's almost like it's a second failed break.
Yeah.
I had a theology teacher in high school who used to call it bending the stick. And he said that when you have a tree that's growing crooked, you have to bend it and like tie it down too far in the opposite direction so that when you let it go, it's straight.
Yeah. That's good.
So I do feel like, it's almost like there's this parallel in modern takes on architecture. We're like, where we look at things and we're like, we used to have these beautiful buildings and now we have these functional utilitarian crap holes, right? Like these boxes.
Totally, yeah.
And you see an increasing level of advocacy for a sort of neoclassical approach to architecture. And you see new churches being built, and they're not like the Gothic cathedrals of old.
It's not quite right. Yeah.
But they're trying. Like they're moving in that direction. And they get dinged a lot because it's like, oh, well, you see the people like who hated Christendom College's new chapel.
Yeah.
I've been there. I think it's pretty phenomenal for what they had to work with.
Yeah. In terms of resources, etc.
In terms of resources, they made something beautiful. They made something that they attempted to make transcendent. And there's going to be in any kind of reconquista, cultural reconquista, there are going to be trips and falls along the way where we're trying to, it's the joke that we talked about last time of, like the dad saying, we don't know how to do it anymore.
Yeah.
But we don't. I mean, we spend hundreds of years building some of these cathedrals that are basically museums now in Europe.
Yeah. Well,
like men literally worked their whole lives knowing they were never going to see the daggone thing finished.
Right.
Like we don't have that in us anymore.
Yeah.
We want results. We want them now. We want to ship. And so part of that is whatever technology has done to us in terms of our need for more immediate gratification. We don't work for legacy. We don't collectively come together to do these projects because we're like, it's okay if I don't see this. I know that I gave something to the effort.
Yeah. So right. So part of, I think, implicit in the Pasulka book, is a kind of warning that you're not going to be able to choose the terms of this coming catastrophe. And guess what, guys? The catastrophe is already sort of fully set. And if you're not willing to, God, I hate this expression, but think outside the box. Like if you're not willing to rethink your priors, if you're not willing, like it's happening right now. Right. And the speed and the rapidity that you've talked about in terms of AI, I mean, it's still so like it's impossibly new, right?
It's so new.
And if this thing is on the verge of changing, as much as we anticipate that it is likely going to change, then you have to get into you have to get into the business of serious sense making, honest, not scared. Are you ready for the moment? Because the moment is here. And I don't think either of us are necessarily even saying like, and it's all bad. Like
no, it's not all bad,
but it's gonna be different, right? That's what we were talking about.
If it was all bad, I don't think it would be as dangerous.
Right. That's right. That's a good point.
Because people would be like, nope, don't want that.
Yeah.
There was something in this book, and I thought I took a note, and I can't find the note, and it's annoying me. But it was something that related to the whole thing that Elon is been talking about, with this robot-driven hyperabundance. There was a concept in the book that tied into the idea that we're not going to work. We're going to have to remember how to pray. Because once technology advances far enough, like we're not going to do the things the robots do. I can't find it. I had my Kindle thing open with the notes in the sidebar, but I have too many.
Podcast fail right here.
It's a podcast
fail. We failed
failure.
Failure.
Emotional damage. Yeah. So I don't know. Like we once again talked about the book without really getting that deep into the book because the book is weird.
You might say it's a specialty. You might say that we have nailed this.
It's our charismatic
charism. It's our charism.
To be circumlocutory about the topic du jour.
Now, to be fair, I've been a little busy.
And I've realized, by the way, I have too, and I've realized over the course of this episode that my camera is just off kilter, that much. So for the OCD people in the audience, I apologize. It's been bugging me the whole show.
Hey, Steve, I want you to make me a promise live. in terms of the recording. Do not go back in post and try to kern yourself a little bit.
I'm not going to.
Thank you.
No.
Thank you.
No.
Thank you. Yeah. I would feel guilty.
And nobody got time for that shit.
Ain't got time for this, boss. I ain't got time for this, boss. What you talking about, man?
So you are now like 6 hours past your bedtime.
I mean, it's pretty late for me, man.
I've been watching your eyes get droopier and droopier as the show goes on. You have put in a valiant showing.
Well, I do appreciate. No. Look, we promised the audience last episode that there would be no disruptions, that I would continue.
It's almost 1 a.m. in jolly old England.
He smokes. I cannot remember the last time I've been up at 1 a.m. unless I have to get up to pee.
I can't tell you the last time I went to bed before 1 a.m.
Yeah, stop.
There were a couple nights I was so tired I passed out while I was watching something at like midnight, 12:30. But in general, like never. It never happens.
All right. Well, I probably we should put a can on this one. Put a lid on this one, as they used to say about President Biden at 4 p.m.
Okay, so reminders, like and subscribe. Go to our website, mtspodcast.com. Sign up for our mailing list if you want to know about stuff that's going on. That's all I got.
Yeah, but we'll be back next week. I will be back stateside, so we'll be in the same time zone, same Wednesday slot. We love this. This is good.
Same bat time, same bat channel.
Yeah, this has been great. Thanks, Steve. This is great.
Yep.
Appreciate it, brother.
All right, man. Take care.